I became emperor of the failing Royce dynasty, while my father's coffin was still open beside the throne. And I told me I could return to Earth only if I drove the dynasty's power below zero. So I made the worst decision I could make, and the dynasty got stronger. The crown seal was the one object that made an emperor's civil orders lawful. I dropped it onto the funeral floor. It split in half. The two ministers who had crowned me stopped trying to control me and backed away like I had just revealed a master plan. That was my first lesson. In this place, sabotage had a bad habit of looking like leadership. One clause made it worse: dying wouldn't send me home. I had to wreck the country alive. So could I find one terrible decision these people would stop praising? To understand why I broke the crown before lunch, go back 20 minutes? To the second I woke beside my father's coffin. I opened my eyes inside the palace throne hall. My father's coffin stood beside me, while hundreds of officials knelt before the throne. Yesterday, I had edited dancing clips on Earth and argued with a forum stranger who claimed ancient life sounded romantic. I told the stranger it meant cold water, bad medicine, and zero Wi-Fi. The universe read that post and chose violence. A cold band tightened around my wrist. A flat voice spoke inside my head. PAC's national power system connected. Great. I had been kidnapped by the worst customer service bracelet in history. PAX showed me one number, Royce National Power, plus 1000. Then it gave me the only exit. Drive that number below zero, and I could return to Earth. I was Cameron Royce now, the dynasty's least respected prince. My older brother was Jordan Royce, the crown prince and northern general. With Jordan away, two ministers had installed me as their spare idiot. The bloated senior minister held the crown seal below the steps. The thin prime minister watched without blinking. PAX tagged both men as politically untouchable and personally lethal. It marked the white-haired concubine behind me as the senior minister's spy. The hairpin in her sleeve was a weapon. She was gorgeous, calm, and dangerous, so I looked away before ancient politics added creepy emperor to my first day. The senior minister lifted the crown seal. Your Majesty will authorize Crown Prince Jordan's execution before news of your father's death leaves this hall. There it was. First meeting. Immediate fratricide. Ancient politics started at murder. The prime minister stepped closer. Jordan has an army. Delay gives him time to claim the throne. My father had split power between two objects. The crown seal made civil orders lawful, while the war sigil commanded the army. The senior minister set the crown seal on the decree. Stamp it! The ministers controlled the war sigil, but they still needed my hand on the crown seal to make Jordan's death look legitimate. I looked at my father's coffin. Then I looked at the order killing Jordan. These men spoke about both of us like disposable tools. That part stopped being funny. Still, the mission offered a beautiful angle. Kill the best general, start a succession war, and national power should drop hard. Too bad I hated being ordered around more than I loved good math. I reached forward and snatched the crown seal from the minister's hand. The kneeling officials lifted their heads. The senior minister's cheeks darkened. Give that back! I turned the heavy seal over in my palm. You crowned me this morning. Try pretending for 1 full hour. His hand moved toward his sword. The prime minister didn't move. That was worse. Quiet men who study your breathing are rarely planning lunch. The senior minister climbed the first throne step. A useless prince should know why he was chosen. I leaned back. A bloated minister should know why he's still standing below me. That insult hit exactly where it needed to. His face tightened. The court watched him choose between swallowing it and attacking the emperor in front of my father's body. Naturally, he made the dumber choice. He lunged. I held the crown seal over the stone floor. Take one more step, I told him, and your precious authority becomes expensive gravel. He stopped. Beautiful. The puppet had found the string and wrapped it around the puppeteer's throat. The prime minister finally spoke. Your Majesty understands the seal cannot be replaced. I held it over the floor. I understand you need it. The officials nearest the steps lowered their eyes. His climb stopped. Then he threatened Jordan. The prime minister threatened consequences. I let them finish because arrogant men deserve enough rope to embarrass themselves properly. Then I opened my fingers. The crown seal hit the funeral floor. The crack split the hall. One half rolled beneath my father's coffin. The other stopped against the senior minister's boot. A court clerk dropped his brush. The white-haired concubine's hand left the hairpin in her sleeve. 3 officials quietly moved away from the senior minister. Then he charged the throne. The prime minister caught his arm and locked him in place. Move, the senior minister snarled. The prime minister tightened his grip. Kill him now, and Jordan marches here with an army. You will have destroyed the only shield between us and the crown prince. The senior minister stared at me like he wanted to chew through the steps. The 2 men backed away without Jordan's death order. Behind them, an older official shifted his bow toward me. Another quietly covered the unsigned decree with his sleeve. The senior minister's public control had lost its clean edge in front of the entire court. I smiled. I had broken the dynasty's legal symbol, provoked both puppet masters, and survived. Finally, a productive morning, except the thin minister looked impressed. That man had 9-dimensional chest disease. I had broken the seal on impulse, and he was already inventing a hidden strategy. The court followed their retreat with its eyes. Before the seal broke, the officials checked the ministers before every bow. Now they faced me first. Pax stayed silent. My first sabotage had made the court fear me. After the hall emptied, I learned the puppet master's names. Milton Dawson was the bloated senior minister. Wesley Boone was the thin prime minister. The prince's memories supplied the ugly basics. Both men had spent years collecting officers, officials, and frightened relatives. My father had kept either one from taking full control. With him dead, they were already competing for the throne behind me. Behind them, the white-haired spy was Kira Dawson, Milton's adopted daughter and the concubine assigned to watch me. She gathered one broken half of the seal with both hands. Should I call the royal craftsman? No, leave it broken. Kira looked up. You want the court to see it? I want Milton to remember who dropped it. Kira's practiced blankness slipped. She looked curious now. Kira later told me Milton demanded my removal the moment they left. Wesley blocked him again. Killing me would bring Jordan's army south, and Wesley had decided my seal stunt was a deliberate trap. Milton wanted guards outside my chamber. Wesley refused because obvious guards would warn Jordan's supporters. They left still arguing, which meant my first bad decision had split the men who crowned me. I genuinely don't know what Wesley thought I was capable of. At that point, I still missed food delivery, but their clean route was gone. Whatever came next would be dirtier. That night, in my private chamber, Kira stayed because spies apparently came with the furniture. She poured wine beside my bed. Her white hair fell over one shoulder and her expression stayed perfectly blank. I watched the hairpin in her sleeve. Kira noticed. Does it bother you that I'm still here? You're the prettiest assassination warning I've ever received. Her mouth twitched. That wasn't an answer. It was the honest part. She set the cup down. You knew. Were you hoping I did? Kira folded her hands. I was hoping you were still stupid. Careful. That almost sounded personal. It was professional disappointment. Okay, the spy had jokes. That made the hairpin more concerning. Pax told me you report to Milton. Kira's fingers stopped on the cup. I tapped my bracelet. It also told me you're bad at killing people. That feels important. Her eyes sharpened. Would you like me to improve? There it was. A flirt, a threat, and terrible employee feedback in one sentence. I wanted the dynasty weaker. At that moment, I had missed the clause about my own death. A murdered emperor sounded catastrophic enough to help, so I gave her an opening. I drank, slurred my words, and let my head fall against the bedpost. Kira waited. I breathed slowly. Her shoes crossed the floor without sound. The hairpin slid from her sleeve. Pax spoke 1 second before she struck. Clarification: user death does not satisfy the return condition. My eyes opened. Worst customer service. Perfect timing. Kira drove the hairpin toward my throat. I caught her wrist. Her calm face finally broke. She twisted hard, stepped on the edge of her own robe, and lost her balance. I pulled the weapon free as she hit the carpet on one knee. The entire assassination lasted 3 seconds. Kira stared at the hairpin in my hand. Her breathing stayed controlled, but one loose strand of white hair shook against her cheek. Why did you pretend to be helpless? I was testing a theory. Kira frowned. Which theory? I answered. That my life choices are terrible. She didn't laugh. Fair. She had just tried to kill me. Kira lowered her head and waited for guards, torture, or a quiet burial. Milton had trained her to expect usefulness first, and mercy never. I tossed the hairpin onto the table. Get up. Kira looked at me. You're sparing me? I'm promoting the arrangement. She stayed still. I pointed at the door. Keep spying. Report everything I do. Just report it accurately. Her suspicion deepened. Because Milton already trusts your messages. I need him to hear exactly what I want him to hear. Kira's shoulders lowered by half an inch. Then she rose slowly, still waiting for the hidden punishment. No guards came. I asked for no confession, and the cup stayed beside her. I had caught an assassin, kept the spy, and turned Milton's own daughter into an open messenger channel. She had entered the room as Milton's tool. She left carrying my next move. Kira picked up the abandoned wine cup. Do I report the assassination? I slid the hairpin toward her. Every detail. Kira glanced at my hand. Even that you caught me? I smiled. Especially that. Milton deserves the full panic. Kira looked at the hairpin on the table. You're using my failure against him. I'm using his confidence against him. Your failure was just helpful. That earned the smallest, strangest smile. Kira reached the door, then glanced back. What should I report first? I smiled. Tomorrow, you're going to help me fire the entire Royce bloodline. The next morning, in my study, Kira sat across from me with the world's most hostile calligraphy brush. The broken crown seal rested on the table between us. I had lost the clean way to issue royal orders, but a witness decree could still force the court to act, so I used it against the source of every legal heir, my own family. Write this, I told Kira. Every member of the Royce bloodline loses royal status. The brush stopped. Kira looked up. Every member? Jordan. Me. Distant cousins. Decorative uncles. Fire the whole collection. She stared at me like the assassination had damaged my head after all. Pax displayed the consequence in one clean line. The Royce family supplied the dynasty's legal succession and most of its military prestige. Remove that status, and national power should fall. The decree would strip Jordan's title, pay, succession rights, and lawful command. If he kept leading troops, the court could call it rebellion. That sounded terrible for the country. Finally, a plan that sounded official. Kira lowered the brush. You'd remove yourself from your own throne, trying to ruin my career. Kira blinked. You became emperor yesterday. I smiled. New personal record. Her mouth twitched again. The spy was getting dangerously close to a personality. I pushed the paper toward her. Write my name first. Kira's eyes moved from me to the broken seal. Why trust me with this? You already tried to kill me. Our relationship has nowhere to go except professional. Kira glanced at the hairpin on my desk. That's a very low standard. I pushed the decree closer. It's an ancient government, she wrote. The decree traveled under my direct order, witnessed by palace officials who had seen me break the crown seal. By noon, every court faction knew the Royce family had fired itself. Kira carried it to Milton as the first gift I had ever given his spy. Before sunset, Kira returned to my study with one cheek red. The joke stopped. Kira told me what happened because she could no longer hide the mark. Milton had read the decree twice, realized every backup prince had just become politically useless, and blamed the messenger. He struck her hard enough to knock her into a table. Then Milton called her an ungrateful tool and demanded to know why she had let me use her. Kira had spent years risking her neck for that man. One order from me ruined his plan, so he punished the person he owned. Wesley watched the whole thing. Kira said he understood the decree immediately. I had used Milton's own spy to announce that every replacement prince was gone. Milton called it betrayal. Kira finished her report without asking for sympathy. He expected her back before dark, but she made no move toward the door. I slid a cold cloth toward her. Kira touched it to her cheek. You're not angry that I reported everything? I told you to report accurately. Kira studied my face. You expected him to hit me? I shook my head. No. My fingers tightened around the desk edge. Milton treated people like tools. My father's court had taught half the palace to do the same. I could joke about losing a throne. I could not joke about that. So I gave Kira a different order. Next time Milton raises his hand, step back. Her gaze sharpened. He's my father, I corrected her. Adopted father. Kira tightened the cold cloth. He still owns my position. I tapped the desk. Then stay close until he doesn't. Kira looked at the cloth. Is that concern? Don't make it weird. She glanced toward my bedroom. You invited a spy into your bedroom. I surrendered the point. Fair. Milton had fewer replacement heirs. Kira was still standing in my study. Scoreboard, still cursed. I needed more enemies. Ancient tyrants had several proven methods for destroying a court. Taxes took time. Giant statues required labor. Stealing the minister's daughters felt immediate. So I told Kira to summon women from every powerful ministerial family. Kira blinked. For what purpose? A harem. Kira set the cloth down. You barely survived the woman already assigned to you. That's why I need variety. Her stare could have spoiled milk. I leaned closer. Look, ministerial daughters are efficient rebellion fuel. Their fathers get angry, the court gets jealous, and I get company. It's the first policy with 3 benefits. Kira folded her arms. You forgot the assassinations. I counted those under company. 3 days after I offended every noble family in the capital, the selection hall filled with their daughters. Silk, jewelry, perfume, political resentment. The room looked expensive enough to have its own tax bracket. Milton sent relatives of his allies because refusing the emperor would expose weakness. Wesley arrived with 2 women who caught Pax's attention immediately. Milton looked across the candidates and smiled at me. The court has provided suitable ornaments for your majesty. He expected me to choose the safest faces and embarrass myself with them. I looked directly at Wesley's 2 most watchful candidates. I prefer the dangerous ornaments. Milton's smile thinned. The first was Hazel Dorsey, a merchant clan survivor with calm eyes and the posture of someone pricing every object in the room. The second was Maeve Benton, a talisman and medicine prodigy who looked soft until she noticed the guards' weak positions. In my defense, both dangerous women looked incredible that morning. Pax showed me their hidden history. My father had destroyed both women's families years earlier after their clans offended him. Wesley had secretly saved the girls, raised them, and turned their hatred toward the Royce throne. Their current orders were simple: stay close to me, find my weakness, help destroy the dynasty, and keep me away from Jordan. Perfect. I had asked for enemies, and Wesley had walked 2 of them into my hall. Hazel met my stare without bowing deeply. "Your Majesty seems pleased," I smiled. "You have no idea." Hazel's mouth curved. "I usually charge for that expression." "Good." The merchant survivor pushed back. Maeve stepped beside her, careful and formal. Pax flashed another warning. "Contact sensitivity, severe. Sudden intimate touch may cause collapse, a strange weakness." Also the first interesting thing the system had told me all day. Maeve caught me reading her expression. "Is there a problem?" I looked at her hands. "You look nervous." Maeve raised her chin. "I'm not." I offered my hand. "Then prove it." The hall leaned toward us. Maeve's chin lifted. She placed her fingers in mine because backing down in front of the other women would cost status. I closed my hand gently. Her face turned red. "Still calm?" I asked. Maeve tried to pull away with dignity. "Perfectly." Drew her 1 step closer. She folded. Maeve went limp against my chest before the room finished reacting. I caught her under the shoulders and stared at Pax. Look, Pax had undersold that feature. A court daughter whispered that Maeve had thrown herself at me. Hazel turned her head. She fainted. The daughter sniffed. Conveniently. Kira stepped between them. "Try it yourself. I can arrange the fall." The daughter looked away. Every candidate now understood Kira had my backing. Hazel covered a smile with one hand. Wesley moved forward. "Maeve is clearly unfit for palace service. I will remove her." I kept hold of the unconscious prodigy. "You brought her to me." Wesley glanced at the watching court. "She has embarrassed herself." I adjusted Maeve in my arms. "She embarrassed you. That improves her application." Wesley stopped. "Wrong answer, strategist." I ordered a chair. Maeve woke seconds later, realized where she was, and tried to stand so fast she nearly fell again. Her eyes found my hand. "Don't touch me," Maeve snapped. I lifted both palms. "You challenged the test." Maeve pointed at me. "You invented the test." I nodded. "And you passed memorably." Hazel laughed once. Kira looked between us like she was deciding which murder to schedule first. The selection ended there. I chose Hazel. I chose Maeve. Then I called Kira forward and chose her again in front of everyone. Kira's expression barely changed, but she moved to my right side before any court daughter could take the place. There. 1 spy, 2 Avengers, and enough jealousy to power a small city. That night, in my chamber, the 3 women stood close enough to kill me and polite enough to make it awkward. I asked what they could do. Maeve placed a paper talisman between 2 fingers. It ignited without burning her skin. "I make warding seals, medicines, and alchemical compounds," she explained. "I can also read certain signs. Useful, dangerous, emotionally unstable around handshakes. Excellent government material." Hazel gave me less. "My family traded," she said. "I inherited some wealth." Pax marked exceptional financial judgment, negotiation skill, and talent for reading people. Hazel looked me straight in the eye while hiding the exact ability I needed. I respected the hustle. I turned to Hazel. "You will control the royal treasury." Palace clerk brought the treasury keys before Wesley could object. Her composure cracked. "You're giving me the treasury?" I placed the keys in her palm. "I'm giving an enemy access to state money. Please try to disappoint me correctly." Kira inhaled sharply. Maeve stared. Hazel recovered first. "And if I empty it?" I leaned back. "I'll praise your initiative." Her eyes narrowed. Across the chamber, Wesley's hand tightened inside his sleeve. He had planted Hazel to study my weakness. I had placed the Dynasty's money in front of hers. Hazel noticed his reaction and closed her fingers around the keys. Then I faced Maeve. A folded royal tutor robe waited on the side table. I pushed it toward her. "You will serve as royal tutor and palace medical advisor." Maeve stepped back. "I came here today." I shrugged. "So did I, basically." Maeve clutched the robe. "You know nothing about me." I counted on my fingers. "You hate my family, understand medicine, use talismans, and lose fights with hand contact." I folded 1 finger down. "That's more information than the ministers had when they crowned me." Hazel smiled openly now. Maeve looked offended, embarrassed, and slightly impressed. Dangerous combination. Kira lifted the tutor's robe and placed it over Maeve's arms herself. Wesley watched from across the chamber. Kira didn't look at him. Wesley had sent 2 revenge assets into my palace. By nightfall, Hazel controlled the money. Maeve held authority over royal education and health, and Kira had a permanent seat beside me. Hazel checked the treasury keys again. Maeve held the robe carefully. Kira stayed at my right. All 3 had entered ready to use me. Now they were careful with what I had given them. That should have worried me. I was busy planning the next disaster. A messenger arrived before midnight with Milton's demand that I attend the next court session. Kira read the invitation, then watched me carefully. "He plans to humiliate you in public." I smiled. "Good. Public failures count harder." Milton wanted a decadent fool in front of the court. I decided to rehearse. Hazel asked what I planned before court. I looked at the 3 dangerous women now living inside my palace. "A costume banquet." Maeve's face tightened. "What's a costume banquet?" I smiled. The next bad decision. 5 nights later, in the palace banquet hall, every minister's daughter was dressed for a game she barely understood. I had explained costume play in plain language. Pick a role, wear something dramatic, compete for my attention. Ancient nobles heard that and arrived dressed like the throne depended on it. Hazel wore a merchant princess outfit with hidden pockets in every seam. Maeve dressed as a talisman hunter and kept glaring at anyone who came within arm's reach. Kira chose white silk, silver hairpins, and the expression of a woman already tired of my decisions. Kira looked over the room. You invited your enemy's daughters, gave them costumes, and added wine. I spread my hands. I prefer the term controlled diplomacy. Hazel checked the exits. Nothing here is controlled. Maeve adjusted the paper seals at her wrist. Especially him. I had requested entertainment. The 3 women were already judging me before the game had started. Kira adjusted one silver hairpin. You spent 3 days discussing Hazel's pockets and Maeve's talismans. I grinned at her. Are you jealous? Kira's eyes narrowed. I'm identifying neglected security risks. I put a hand over my heart. Then I apologize for neglecting my first assassin. Kira's face stayed blank. Her ears turned pink. Hazel glanced between us. Was that flirting? Kira answered too quickly. No! Maeve nodded toward me. He's rarely that organized. My apology created a second competition before the first had even started. Excellent, very controlled diplomacy. Then the outer doors burst open. A masked woman in a black cloak drove through 2 guards. Cameron Royce, I intercepted your death order for Jordan. Then she charged straight at me. The silver bird on her shoulder marked the Blackbird Guard, my father's hidden succession unit. Whoever she was, she had come to kill the emperor. The harem saw something else. One court daughter pointed at the mask. She came dressed as an assassin. Another grabbed the attacker's cloak. She can't skip the line. The masked killer tried to throw her aside. That was when 12 jealous amateurs swarmed one elite fighter. One woman wrapped both arms around the killer's sword arm. Another pulled the cloak over her head. A third hit her with a decorative fan and shouted that cheating ruined the game. Look, I need you to understand how dumb this was. The attacker could have cleared the room in seconds. The women were untrained, offended, and fully convinced murder was an attention stunt. For the first time, 12 jealous women moved like a team. The masked woman shifted her sword twice, searching for a line that reached me without cutting the women. That hesitation told me she wouldn't cut through civilians to reach me. Good. I could work with that. She tore free and raised her blade. I moved before she cut anyone. I grabbed the nearest court daughter by the waist, pulled her behind me, and stepped into the killer's path. Your target is here, I told the masked woman. Leave them out of it. Her blade stopped against my throat. The room went quiet for a useful reason this time. Every woman now understood the weapon was real. The masked killer's voice came cold through the cloth. You stole Jordan's throne. I am taking it back. I had no idea what death order she meant. I did hear the useful part. She wanted Jordan on the throne. Pax flashed a route across my vision. Voluntary transfer to a general commanding an army, national power -1000. There it was, my first clean chance to lose 4 digits. I lowered my hands. Take me to Jordan. The blade pressed closer. I'll abdicate in front of him, I continued. He gets the throne. You get the legitimate heir. I get out of this palace before someone invents another formal dinner. The masked woman hesitated. The harem stared at me like I had proposed selling the building during dessert. Kira stepped forward. Your Majesty, that's not funny. I shook my head. I'm being deeply serious. Hazel's eyes narrowed. She already knew Wesley had ordered her to keep me away from Jordan. The masked woman seized my wrist. You'll come willingly? Nodded. Enthusiastically. Pax confirmed the route was active. My national collapse was finally loading. Then Maeve slapped a glowing talisman onto the floor. A wall of light exploded between us. The masked woman lost her grip. I flew backward into a table. Wine, fruit, and one extremely expensive chair died for the Dynasty. Maeve stood between me and freedom, both hands raised. Maeve warned, You're not taking him. The masked woman cut through the light. Move! Hazel kicked the banquet doors shut. Nobody leaves with the Emperor. I stared at both women. Wesley had planted them to destroy me. Now they were protecting the throne because their orders required access. My own planted enemies had teamed up to keep me on the throne. Fantastic! The masked woman rushed Maeve. Maeve threw 3 paper seals. Fire cracked across the floor. The killer twisted between them and reached for me again. Pax refreshed Maeve's warning. My touch could make Maeve collapse. If another woman grabbed me afterward, Maeve could erupt into a violent jealousy surge. Touch was apparently a weapon now. I saw the route. It was a terrible route. Naturally, I used it. Maeve backed toward me while launching another seal. I caught her hand. Her whole body locked. Maeve turned bright red. Cameron! I smiled. Sorry. Maeve glared at me. You're absolutely not sorry. Tightened my grip. Correct. I pulled her close before she could escape the contact. Maeve folded against me. The masked woman saw her collapse and lunged for my other arm. Now, I told the killer. Grab me and run! She caught my wrist. Maeve's eyes opened. The air around her snapped hot. She saw another woman holding me, and every talisman at her belt ignited. Oh, Hazel whispered. That seems bad. Maeve rose with fire rolling around both hands. The masked woman released me and raised her sword. Maeve pointed at her. Take your hand off him. You were unconscious, the killer replied. Maeve snapped. I recovered angry. That was the most Maeve sentence possible. She launched the fire. The blast filled the hall. I shoved the masked woman sideways before it hit. We crashed behind a pillar. Her mask tore loose. Our faces collided, and the accidental kiss lasted exactly long enough for the explosion to make it everyone's business. The shockwave threw us apart. Maeve emptied her strength and dropped unconscious. The masked woman struck the floor beside me and stopped moving. A section of the ceiling collapsed onto the banquet table. The harem cheered because they thought I had won the game. Hazel dragged 2 stunned women away from falling plaster. Kira reached Maeve first. The party had become a rescue scene, and every supposed ornament was now doing real work. I lay under broken silk curtains with smoke in my mouth, and one clear conclusion: I had almost abdicated. Maeve's jealousy had blown up the hall, and my only clean route out. When I woke in my private chamber, the masked woman was chained to a chair. Wesley's soldiers guarded the hallway, and smoke still drifted past the windows. Maeve slept on a couch with Kira checking her pulse. Hazel stood near the door, watching everyone. Pax delivered the insult after the human damage was complete. Abdication route failed. Assassin defeat route available. Victory may increase national power. Of course it could. Wesley Boone entered with guards. The Prime Minister looked at the broken wall, the unconscious prodigy, and the captive assassin. His eyes moved to me with fresh respect. I had been unconscious for most of the ending. 9-dimensional chess remained undefeated. Wesley reached for the captive. The Blackbird Guard answers to the late Emperor's succession mandate. She must be interrogated. Wesley wanted a hearing, a cell, and a 6-hour meeting. The explosion had already hit me. A recap could survive without me. I sat up. She stays. Wesley paused. On what authority? I looked at the woman in the chair. Her mask was gone now. She had sharp eyes, dark hair, and enough fury to heat the remaining wall. In my defense, she looked furious and gorgeous. She's beautiful, I told Wesley. I'm keeping her. The captive pulled against the chains. You shameless animal. I pointed at her. See? Chemistry. Kira pressed 2 fingers to Maeve's wrist. Your standards remain terrifying. Hazel opened the door for Wesley. The Emperor has chosen his prisoner. Wesley's guards looked at him, then at me. 2 of them stepped away from the prisoner's chain. The Prime Minister wanted a formal interrogation. I had turned the captive into a private royal claim before he could touch her. Wesley bowed and withdrew. The prisoner waited until the door closed. My name is Reese Maddox. I captained the Blackbird Guard. Now I knew who had nearly killed me. Reese leaned forward against the chains. I came because you ordered Jordan to kill himself. Kira's hand stopped over Maeve's wrist. I saw it. The original crown seal was broken. Any later death order had to use a replica? Tell me everything, I said. Reese told me what had happened 5 days earlier on the North Road. A royal courier named Captain Archer Lowe had carried a decree commanding Jordan to take his own life. The document bore a forged copy of the crown seal. Reese and the Blackbird Guard ambushed the convoy. They killed the courier, destroyed the order, and marked me as the ruler who had tried to erase the true heir. She had chosen the banquet because my enemies, guards, and political hostages would all gather there. Kira later confirmed that Milton and Wesley knew Captain Lowe had vanished. Wesley predicted Reese would attack during the banquet and expected Hazel and Maeve to use the same opening. He had deliberately put every hostile faction around me in one room and waited for us to kill each other. Too bad for him. We all survived. Back in my chamber, Reese studied me. Your father, Emperor Henry, once told me the next ruler might need tolerance and peace more than conquest. His formal succession still favored Jordan. I came to judge whether you were a fool or a traitor. I tilted my head. And, Reese answered, you're both. Fair assessment. The words forged copy drained the color from Kira's face. That gave me my suspect, Milton. I also had a rebellion route sitting directly in front of me, so I did the worst possible thing for the truth. I ordered the decree, I told Reese. Kira's head snapped toward me. Reese pulled the chains tight. You admit it? I nodded. Yes. The lie gave Reese a clean enemy. More important, it gave Jordan a reason to move his army. I cut Reese's chains with the sword left beside the bed. She rose slowly, rubbing one wrist. I dictated a second order in front of her. Jordan's remaining military authority was revoked under my name. If he kept the Northern Army, the court would call it rebellion. Pax opened 2 routes. An uprising could subtract 1,000. If Jordan took the capital, the collapse could subtract 10,000. Now that was a scoreboard. Reese stared at the broken chain. You're releasing me? Handed her the sword. I need you to deliver a message. She waited. I met her eyes. Tell Jordan I stole his throne, strict his command, and tried to kill him. If he wants justice, he should bring his army south and take the capital. Kira stepped between us. Cameron, stop! I looked at her. That was the first time she called me Cameron. Reese still had a sword within reach, so I enjoyed the warmth for half a second. Reese picked up her sword. When Jordan arrives, you will regret this. I stepped aside. I regret most things before lunch. She walked out under Wesley's guards, and none of them stopped her after I raised one hand. The assassin had entered as my executioner. She left as my rebellion courier. Before midnight, I gave Kira one final message for Milton. Tell the bloated puppet master I will attend his court session. Kira closed her eyes. You're making every enemy move at once. That's the idea. It was also the problem. Reese rode north carrying my challenge. Milton prepared a public humiliation. Wesley kept watching me like I had planned the explosion, and Jordan was already marching south. I expected a siege. I had forgotten what he believed I had promised him 10 years earlier. Next morning, in the throne hall, Milton had every minister waiting. Wesley's chair was empty. That should have warned the bloated puppet master. Instead, he saw an empty rival's seat and assumed the whole court belonged to him. So I answered his invitation with the entire harem. Kira walked at my right. Hazel carried the royal treasury keys at her waist. Maeve had slept through most of the night after detonating my banquet. She still moved carefully, but her talismans were back on her wrists. Behind them came every minister's daughter Milton had delivered as a decoration. Court custom allowed the emperor one consort at formal session. I brought enough women to start a seating crisis. The officials bowed. Then the women flowed around them, occupied the front rows, and dragged tiny stools beside the throne. One court daughter took a minister's cushion. Another moved her father's documents so she could sit closer to me. An older official tried to protest. A woman behind him tugged his beard and asked him to speak louder. Two palace attendants looked toward Milton for instructions. I tapped the throne arm instead. They carried in more stools. The officials nearest the aisle stopped checking Milton. They moved their papers from my stools while his beard-tugging problem multiplied. A court daughter placed her stool across the aisle and trapped one of Milton's allies behind his own desk. He had to ask her to move. She told him to wait. Look, I had ordered decadence. They arrived with crowd control. Milton stood below the throne in ceremonial robes. His smile tightened 1 inch at a time. Your Majesty, Milton announced, the court is a place of law. Keep private entertainment outside. I dropped onto the throne. Then entertain me legally. Kira covered a smile with her sleeve. Milton pointed toward the women. Remove them. I looked at the court daughters. Did anyone hear an emperor? Hazel jingled the treasury keys. I heard a former hiring manager. Maeve leaned against her stool. A loud one. Milton's allies started objecting at once. The harem answered by spreading farther across the hall. Pax waited until the human embarrassment was complete. Court custom broken. National power, -500. I nearly hugged the bracelet. A real loss. Verified. Public. Beautiful. Milton mistook my smile for surrender. That confidence lasted until the side doors opened. 6 handlers dragged in a chained beast the size of a wagon. It had a long jaw, armored skin, and blue dye running down its neck. Someone had painted a crocodile and expected theology to finish the job. Look, the dye was still running while Milton waited for worship. The creature snapped at a guard. The guard nearly lost his sleeve. Milton spread both arms. Heaven has sent the sacred sky dragon to bless your Majesty's reign. Every minister on his side dropped to one knee. Milton called 3 officials by title and made each one praise the omen. One sounded eager, another frightened, and the last stared at the beast's dyed claws before agreeing. A court scholar opened one ceremonial bestiary. He kept his eyes on Milton while reading that a sky dragon could appear in any form chosen by heaven. His entire proof was one frightened scholar reading from one book Milton controlled. Milton looked up at me. Accept the omen, and the court will recognize heaven's approval. Pax gave me the route before I answered. Accept a false sacred beast before the court. Possible national power loss, 2000. Finally, Milton wanted to prove he could place a painted reptile in front of me and make an empire call it holy. I wanted the empire stupid enough to believe him. For once, our goals were holding hands. I rose from the throne and studied the beast. Milton's smile returned. Your Majesty sees its divine nature. I tapped the blue stain. I see paint, Milton insisted. Sacred color. I pointed at its jaw. Pond teeth. Also sacred, Milton replied. The man had committed to the lie. Good. Let him dig. I lifted one hand toward the court. If every minister agrees this animal is a sky dragon, who am I to question heaven? Milton's allies bowed lower. Then a court daughter laughed. It started as one ugly snort from the 3rd row. The woman covered her mouth too late. Milton turned. What is amusing? She pointed at the beast. It smells like a drainage ditch. Another daughter leaned around a minister. The paint is coming off on the chain. A third woman squinted at its short legs. Heaven needs better taste. The harem broke. Women laughed from both sides of the hall. One started ranking the creature beneath every costume from my banquet. Another asked whether Milton had bought it by weight. The fake dragon roared. Maeve winced and pressed one hand to her ribs. Even its voice sounds embarrassed. Milton slammed his palm against a table. Silence! The laughter stopped. Then he pointed at Kira. Kira Dawson, Milton ordered. Tell His Majesty what stands before him. The hall turned toward the white-haired spy. I looked at Kira. Give us your judgment, nobody else's. Milton expected his adopted daughter to restore the script. He had used her for years. He struck her when my decree ruined his plan, yet one command still felt sufficient to pull her back. Kira stepped away from my throne. For half a second, I thought he still owned that part of her. Then Kira walked down the steps and stopped beside the chained beast. She touched the blue stain on its neck. The dye marked her fingers. Kira faced the court. This is a wild animal painted for fraud. Milton's expression emptied. Kira raised the stained hand. Presenting it as a sacred omen is treason against the throne. The scholar lowered Milton's book. The ministers nearest Kira stopped kneeling. Milton snapped, You ungrateful child! Kira looked directly at him. You sent me here as a tool. His Majesty gave me a choice. I kept my mouth shut. One minister grabbed his daughter's wrist. Sit down and stay silent. She pulled free. The woman faced him in front of the court. You called me illegitimate until the emperor wanted women. Then I became your precious daughter. Her father reached for her again. Two harem women stepped between them. Another court daughter rose. She accused her father of selling military grain and blaming the shortage on farmers. A third pointed at the official beside him. She exposed the gifts he demanded before granting court posts. The accusations spread faster than Milton could interrupt them. Milton ordered the palace guards to remove the women. The guards looked at me. I rested one hand on the ceremonial sword. Anyone who touches them can explain the decision to Maeve. Maeve lifted one talisman, then winced because she was still recovering. The front guard lowered his hand. The others stayed exactly where they were. One daughter took her father's official badge and placed it on the floor between them. He bent to retrieve it. She put her stool over it and kept talking. Petty and efficient. I approved. These men had sent daughters, nieces, and discarded relatives into my palace as ornaments. Now those same women had the safest seats in the room and an audience they could not be dragged away from. Hazel placed one treasury key on the table. The metal click silenced 3 finance officials. If anyone wants to deny missing funds, Hazel told them, I can open the ledgers before lunch. 3 men stopped speaking. My sabotage crew had become an anti-corruption mob without consulting me. Overachievers, every last one of them, Milton shouted over the women. This spectacle proves the emperor cannot control his own chamber. I looked at the fathers backing away from their daughters. My chamber seems fine, I told him. Your side is collapsing. Milton pointed at the beast again. The omen remains. The ministers have recognized it. He still wanted the lie. He had lost Kira, lost the daughters, and lost half the room. His mouth kept digging after his status ran out. So I ended the argument before the court scholar could open another page. I drew the ceremonial sword beside the throne. The beast lunged against its chain. I stepped down and cut once. The painted animal dropped. Blue dye spread across the floor beneath Milton's shoes. The court went still because a dead fraud now lay at the minister's feet. I held the sword toward Milton. You brought a dangerous animal into my court and called it heaven. Should I thank you? Milton looked at Kira. She did not move toward him. He looked at his allies. Several were busy avoiding their daughters. I lowered the blade until its point touched the blue stain. Tell the court what happened, I ordered. Milton swallowed. The animal was falsely presented, I asked. By whom? His mouth tightened. Kira watched him. Milton forced the words out. By officials who misled the throne. I stepped closer. And this session? Milton's face went pale. This session should be struck from the record. He had staged a sacred miracle to humiliate me. Now he was begging the court to pretend his miracle never happened. Beautiful. The ministers bowed toward me first. The harem stayed standing. Before that morning, the court daughters had entered through their fathers. After the beast fell, their fathers needed permission to approach them. Then Pax ruined my mood. False omen exposed. Imperial authority strengthened. National power, plus 2,000. I stared at the bracelet. You counted that as leadership? I whispered. Pax answered inside my head. Public interpretation determines national effect. Worst customer service. Consistent policy. I looked at the women around the throne. This is your fault. Hazel picked up the treasury key. We'll try to underperform next time. Maeve rubbed her sore shoulder. He does prefer disasters. I turned to Kira. You were supposed to anticipate my wishes. Kira glanced at the dead beast. Your wish was to praise that? I answered. Yes. Kira nodded toward Maeve. Then your wishes require medical supervision. Maeve raised one tired hand. That's already my office. Kira inclined her head. Fine, next time I'll anticipate the impossible part too. The court heard them tease me beside Milton's failed miracle. His remaining allies heard it too. I had wanted a decadent harem. I had accidentally built a political faction with jokes. That afternoon, in my study, I promoted the one man clever enough to make this worse. Wesley Boone entered as the Prime Minister who had skipped Milton's court trap. He left as Grand Chancellor, the highest civil officer beneath me. Wesley accepted the appointment with both hands. Your Majesty elevated me after destroying Milton's authority. He'll assume you want us to fight. I nodded. I do. His eyes sharpened. I added, please fight badly. 9-dimensional chess disease activated behind his face. Before he could explain my imaginary strategy, a northern messenger arrived. Jordan had mobilized his army and begun marching south. Pax flashed the result. Rebellion route activated, national power minus 2,000. There it was. The score finally moved the correct direction twice in one day. Kira read the report again. Jordan's coming to the capital. The women around the study stopped teasing me. Jordan carried an army. Reese carried my confession. Scorch marks from my last throne transfer still covered the capital. I smiled anyway. A 2,000-point loss was the first clean evidence that my rebellion bait had worked. Kira watched that smile. You look far too pleased. I tapped the report. I finally have a brother willing to ruin my wheat properly. Kira's expression hardened. Jordan may ruin the city. That is the premium route, I replied. I pointed at the report. Tell Grand Chancellor Wesley to take our second-best royal force into open country. Kira waited for the rest. When Jordan appears, I continued, retreat. She stared at me. Without fighting? I answered, especially without fighting. Kira folded the order. One day, your plans will become normal, I told her. Don't threaten me. Before sunset, Wesley carried the war sigil to Milton's residence. Wesley told me later what happened there. Milton confronted him over the Grand Chancellor title and threatened to expose Hazel and Maeve as Wesley's planted revenge assets. Milton jabbed a finger at Wesley. Your women betrayed our faction. Your promotion proves you arranged the court humiliation. Wesley answered by placing the war sigil on the table between them. The token carried formal command over 30,000 soldiers of the Ironcrest Guard, the dynasty's second-best royal force. Civil power has left you, Wesley told him. The Ironcrest army still answers this token. Milton asked why Wesley would surrender that much force. Wesley gave him the answer he later admitted to me. Because this is your last card, play it where everyone can see. Milton closed his hand around the sigil. The bloated puppet master had lost the court, his daughter, and his backup heirs. Now he had 30,000 soldiers and no patience left. By nightfall, the first village roof was burning. A week later, smoke from the western villages reached Royce Citadel, my capital, before Jordan's army did. Refugees came through the gate carrying burned blankets and empty grain sacks. Look, I need you to understand what Milton had done. These were his own people. Milton's soldiers had taken winter food, stripped storehouses, and torched homes behind them. He called it a scorched earth retreat. Families sleeping under the city wall called it theft and arson. Under the war sigil, Milton held formal command over 30,000 Ironcrest soldiers. The token forced them to march. It could not make them respect him. The reports arriving with the refugees carried one useful fact. An Ironcrest commander had objected at the first village. Milton held the sigil before the ranks and ordered the burning anyway. The war sigil made refusal mutiny. The commander obeyed, but his men followed slowly, watched Milton's back, and helped civilians whenever his officers looked away. I stood above the western gate while another cart of injured civilians entered the city. A farmer rode on the back with both hands wrapped in cloth. His wife held a grain scoop because it was the only thing left from their storehouse. 2 children slept beneath a blanket burned through at one corner. The cart stopped below us when a wheel cracked. Palace workers rushed forward, but the farmer flinched at their uniforms. Milton had taught civilians to fear the same colors meant to protect them. A second family arrived on foot. They had carried an old man between them for half the road. The gate guards lowered their spears and helped without waiting for permission. Even the city soldiers had started choosing people over orders. Kira joined me at the wall. Her white hair kept blowing across her face, and she was too angry to fix it. Milton used the authority Wesley gave him, Kira said. He's stealing enough supplies to flee. I watched a child clutch one blackened cooking pot. Milton had finally become the national disaster I wanted. I hated the view. Pax remained silent. The human cost already filled the road below me. Then the lookout shouted that Jordan's army had appeared on the southern road. The wall changed immediately. Archers ran to marked positions. The gates began closing behind the last refugee cart. Court officials who had come to watch my humiliation started backing away from the battlements. The harem stayed. Of course they did. After surviving Reese and Maeve's fireball, apparently an army counted as outdoor entertainment. Good. The rebellion route required my brother to take the capital. I had revoked his authority, confessed to his attempted murder, and invited him to invade. The signal was offensively clear. I climbed the highest section of the wall and cupped both hands around my eyes. Kira watched me. What are you doing? I answered. Binoculars. Kira squinted at my hands. You are using your fingers. Budget binoculars, I told her. Kira looked toward the road. The treasury's full. Hazel refuses waste, I replied. Far below, dust rolled over the plain. I expected siege lines, ladders, and enough soldiers to make Pax happy. Only a narrow column approached the wall. The column carried no siege towers or rams. Its size was wrong for an assault. Jordan rode at the front alone. He wore no crown and carried no shield. His sword stayed sheathed while every archer above him took aim. My war hero brother stopped within bow range and looked up at me like I had interrupted his day. An archer beside me drew his string. I caught the bow and forced it down. The archer stared. Your Majesty, he is in range. I kept the bow lowered. I can see that. The archer pulled against my grip. He is leading a rebellion. He is also the only man capable of winning it, I replied. Do not kill the useful part. I needed Jordan alive for the rebellion route. My hand stayed on the bow because he was still my brother. Below the wall, Jordan called up, You look ridiculous. I lowered my hand binoculars. You rode here alone. We are both taking risks. Jordan glanced at the crowded battlements. Are those your harem guards? Several court daughters had followed us onto the wall with fans, bows, and absolutely no military permission. I looked behind me. Apparently. Kira stepped closer to the edge. State your purpose, Jordan. Jordan smiled at her. So the white-haired assassin switched employers. Kira's hand touched one silver hairpin. My performance reviews improved. I cut in before family banter became murder. You received my message. Jordan looked back at me. Every dramatic word. I called down. Then why are you standing outside my wall with a travel group? Jordan tilted his head. Still impatient, I answered. Still unemployed. Jordan tapped his saddle. I command an army. Illegally, I replied. Jordan laughed. That was concerning. Men about to storm a capital should not look that entertained. He raised one hand. Behind him, the narrow columns split across the road. Then hundreds of banners rose from the dust farther back. The hidden army had been spread low across the fields, using the ridges to mask its size. Tens of thousands of soldiers stood and lifted the same demand above their heads. I leaned over the wall to read it. You know what I expected on those banners? My name. Milton Dawson's name covered everyone instead. Punish the traitor. Protect the emperor. The chant rolled across the plain. Punish Milton. Protect Emperor Cameron. My rebellion had arrived with customer complaints about somebody else. Jordan drew his sword. Every archer on the wall raised a bow. Jordan turned the blade around, lowered himself from the saddle, and placed one knee in the dirt. My emperor, Jordan called. Your brother has returned to remove the traitor who burned your people. The entire army knelt behind him. The wall guards looked at me. One veteran who had served under Milton removed the minister's colored cord from his shoulder and dropped it over the battlement. 2 others followed. Below us, the refugees who could still stand faced the banners. The farmer with wrapped hands raised his burned grain scoop like a salute. The harem looked at me. Kira's hand left her hairpin. I had spent days trying to turn Jordan into an enemy. He had brought tens of thousands of witnesses to call me legitimate. Man, what a disaster. Jordan lifted his head. You kept your promise. The words pulled me back 10 years. We had been boys on the Western practice field before the court started pushing us toward the same throne. Jordan had dropped his training sword and stared toward the distant army camps. I want the battlefield, he told me. I don't want father's throne. Young me had laughed because Jordan was the perfect heir and I was professionally useless. Jordan had grabbed my shoulder. I'm serious, Cameron. The crown is a cage. So I promised before either of us understood how hard the court would fight to make us rivals. I will take the cage, I told him. If the Royce name keeps dragging you back, I will remove that too. Jordan had stared at me, then punched my shoulder hard enough to ruin the moment. Back under the city wall, he pointed his sword toward the banners. You stripped my title, Jordan called. You freed me from succession. He pointed toward the north road. You ordered me south after a forged decree exposed Milton. Then Jordan looked at the refugees beneath the wall. You made him reveal exactly what he would do with military power. That was his interpretation. I had fired him, framed myself for attempted murder, and begged him to invade. 9-dimensional chess had become hereditary. Jordan stood and saluted me with his sword. I recognized Cameron Royce as emperor of the Royce dynasty. The army answered with one roar. The army shouted my name. The wall guards answered, and the second roar came back louder. Jordan winked at me. The wink told me he knew exactly how miserable the coronation made me. Pax waited until the Brotherhood, banners, and army had finished ruining my plan. Succession stabilized. Military loyalty strengthened. National power plus 5,000. I closed my eyes. Congratulations, Jordan called. You look sick. I called back. I was hoping for an invasion. Jordan laughed. You always set unrealistic goals. The archer beside me slowly lowered his bow. Should we open the gate? I sighed. Apparently we're welcoming the rebellion. The gates opened. Jordan rode through beneath banners praising me, which felt personally aggressive. Reese entered beside him. The masked Blackbird captain had delivered my challenge and stayed long enough to learn what Milton's soldiers were doing. Once the gates opened, Jordan explained how Milton had lost his own army. The Ironcrest commander could not openly refuse the war sigil, so he obeyed Milton's retreat order in the most hostile way available. His soldiers left supply carts on the road with loose harnesses and no guards. Jordan's scouts collected food, medicine, and fresh horses without fighting. Ironcrest patrols arrived late every time and reported that the Northern Army had moved too quickly. Then Milton seized the remaining food for himself and burned the villages behind him. An Ironcrest messenger slipped away, found Reese, and gave her the route of every scorched village. Reese carried that report to Jordan. The supposed civil war changed targets before it reached my walls. Milton's orders had given Jordan supplies, witnesses, and soldiers eager to hunt him. Honestly, I do not know what he thought would happen after starving the same soldiers expected to protect him. Jordan dismounted in the courtyard. Reese swung down beside him and pulled off one riding glove. Jordan told me, "My forward detachments are already moving against Milton." Reese added, "The Ironcrest camp will turn the moment they see Jordan's banners." My stomach dropped. "How far ahead?" I asked. Reese answered, "Less than a day." I grabbed his saddle reins. "Call them back." Jordan looked at me. Because Milton was cruel, corrupt, hated, and catastrophically useful. He had done more damage to the dynasty in 1 week than I had managed since taking the throne. "I need him alive," I told Jordan. Jordan's expression changed. "For what?" I answered. "Long story, terrible plan." He folded his arms. "That describes your reign." I pulled myself onto the nearest horse. Jordan caught the bridle. "You just spent a week inviting me to overthrow you. Now you're racing to protect the man I came to punish." I told him. "I contain multitudes." Jordan answered, "You contain bad decisions." I tapped the saddle. "Those are the multitudes." Jordan released the bridle and signaled for a cavalry escort. Kira caught my sleeve. "Cameron, you're riding toward Milton?" I answered. "I came here to destroy the country. He's finally helping." Her grip tightened. "He burned villages," looked toward the smoke. "I know. Damage was what I wanted." Milton had delivered it to civilians. Before the cheering finished, I was already riding west after the villain every sane person wanted dead. By the time I reached Milton's camp, one officer had already tried to stop him. The officer was dead. By dusk, inside Milton's Ironcrest camp, the commander was tied to a post. The soldiers who later gave me the sequence all told it the same way. The commander refused to burn another village. Milton beat him in front of the ranks and tore the command badge from his coat. He tied him where every soldier could watch. Milton raised the war sigil and threatened to execute the commander's family for mutiny. He wanted the next village burned before dark. An officer stepped forward anyway. He told Milton the sigil commanded soldiers. Murder was Milton's choice. The officer's own squad shifted behind him. 3 men moved half a step forward before Milton noticed. That was enough to make the bloated puppet master panic. Milton drew his sword and killed him before the ranks could move. I reached the camp as the officer's body hit the mud. Milton stood beside the post in armor he had never earned. The war sigil hung from one fist. Smoke from the villages stained the horizon behind him. Ironcrest soldiers filled the camp. Every soldier watched Milton and waited for someone else to move first. I had ridden there to save him. The officer's body made that plan feel rotten before Milton said another word. Milton saw me and spread his arms. "The grateful emperor arrives." I dismounted without answering. The dead officer lay between us. I crossed the camp and cut the commander's ropes. Milton's face tightened. That man disobeyed the war sigil. The commander fell forward. His wrists were raw from the rope and one eye had swollen shut. 2 soldiers caught him before he hit the ground. One soldier wrapped his own cloak around the commander's shoulders. 2 men near Milton's banner stepped away from it. I handed one of them my knife. "Get him away from the post." The soldier took it. Then he looked at Milton. Milton lifted the sigil. "Leave him." The soldier carried the commander away. The front rank watched the commander leave. Nobody closed the gap around Milton. I faced him. "Jordan's northern troops are less than a day behind me. Stop burning villages and move east." Milton laughed. "You rode through the night to warn me?" I answered. "I rode through the night to preserve a national disaster." His smile slipped. I stepped closer. "You are very useful when aimed away from civilians. Try it." Milton looked past me toward the camp gate. "Jordan wouldn't send you ahead. This is a trick," I said. "It's a warning." Milton scoffed. "You expect me to believe the puppet commands his brother now?" I rubbed the saddle mark on my hand. "I expected you to recognize cavalry pressure. We are both disappointed." Milton raised the war sigil higher. "I command 30,000 Ironcrest soldiers. Jordan commands criminals stripped of lawful rank." The soldiers around us kept their eyes forward. Milton pointed the sigil at me. "You have a throne because I placed you on it." I glanced at the dead officer. You have a camp because these men have not thrown you out yet. His cheeks darkened. He started walking toward me. You humiliated me at court, stole my daughter, promoted Wesley over me, and sent Jordan to pretend at rebellion. I could have denied half of that. Instead, I tried once more to keep the useful villain alive. Take the supplies you have left, I told him. Leave the civilians, run before Jordan closes the road. Milton stopped within arm's reach. You still think Kira matters? Every soldier close enough heard him. Milton smiled. That white-haired girl was a used tool. I sent her into your bed because she was pretty enough to distract a fool and disposable enough to bury afterward. I did not move. He mistook that for fear. Naturally, he made it worse. When I return to the capital, Milton continued, I will hang her beside every woman in your chamber. Then I will remind the court who gave them to you. I could fail Pax's mission or fail the people standing in front of me. I chose the mission loss. My fist hit Milton's mouth. He stumbled backward into the post. The war sigil dropped into the mud. Nobody moved to catch it. Milton stared at me with blood on his lip and pure disbelief in his eyes. You struck me! Hit him again. Milton crashed through a supply table. Bowls, stolen grain, and one silver plate scattered across the ground. He reached for his sword. I kicked his wrist aside, caught his robe, and dragged him back into the open where every soldier could see. You forged Jordan's death order, I told him. I drove him into the command rack. You hit Kira because your own plan failed. I pulled him upright before he could fold. You burned families who had never raised a weapon. Milton swung wildly. I ducked, struck his ribs, and sent him onto one knee. You killed your own officer for telling the truth. Between blows, I cursed Pax, the throne, and the day the universe threw me across worlds. Milton had finally become useful to my mission. His mouth had made that usefulness irrelevant. The Ironcrest ranks opened around us and cleared space for the fight. Milton saw it too. He grabbed the war sigil from the mud and held it above his head. Protect me, he ordered. No soldier moved. He turned toward the nearest captain. Seize the Emperor! The captain stepped aside and left a straight path between Milton and me. Milton's face changed. The token remained valid. The soldiers had stopped obeying him. Wrong person, wrong army, terrible week. I walked down the path the soldiers had opened. Milton backed away. You need me. I did, I replied. Milton hissed. Wesley will destroy you. I answered. Get in line. He tried another angle. I can still control the court. I looked around at the soldiers refusing his orders. Practice here first. He tried to run. 2 Ironcrest soldiers crossed their spears in front of him. A third soldier picked up Milton's dropped banner and snapped the pole across his knee. The crack reached the rear ranks. Milton's last order had moved nobody. They blocked his escape and left the rest to me. I caught Milton by the collar and turned him toward the ranks. Tell them what you did. Milton clenched his jaw. I slammed him against the post where the commander had been tied, louder than the orders you used to burn their homes. Milton spat at my feet. I served the Dynasty. I punched him in the stomach. He bent over. I said, try again. Milton dragged in a breath. I betrayed the Emperor. The ranks heard him. I pulled him upright. Continue. His eyes moved toward the silent soldiers. I betrayed the Royce Dynasty. A soldier near the front lowered Milton's banner. I tightened my grip. One more. Milton's voice cracked. I betrayed the people. The nearest ranks repeated the last 3 words. Low voices gathered strength until the phrase reached the rear lines. Milton looked around for one loyal face and found helmets turned away from him. The commander, supported by 2 soldiers, looked up from across the camp. Milton had spent years speaking over everyone. Now he had to repeat the truth until the people he abused could hear it. He folded at my feet. Mercy, Milton whispered. I let go of his collar. The bloated puppet master hit the mud beside the war sigil. I turned to the Ironcrest commander. He is yours. Milton's head snapped up. You can't hand me to common soldiers. I looked down at him. You already did. The commander stepped forward. Milton reached inside his boot. I saw the knife too late. He lunged at my back. Steel struck steel behind me. A black blade knocked Milton's wrist aside. Reese Maddox, the Blackbird captain who had tried to kill me days earlier, drove him face first into the ground. Her sword stopped against the back of his neck. A cavalry horn sounded beyond the rear gate. Reese had arrived with Jordan's advance riders. Reese looked at me. You still leave obvious openings. I stared at the knife in Milton's hand. I was busy enjoying his career decline. Reese kicked the weapon away. Enjoy faster. That was the closest thing to concern she had offered me. Milton tried one last order. Soldiers, kill them both. The ranks closed around him. Nobody looked at the sigil. The commander took the sword from one of his men. I walked away before the final stroke. By sunrise, Milton's body hung beneath the army banner he had used to command them. The war sigil was gone from his hand. Only then did Pax speak. Major traitor eliminated. National power plus 5,000. I stopped beside my horse. I asked, you watched that entire disaster and rewarded me? Pax answered. The dynasty lost a destabilizing internal threat. I was trying to keep the threat, I told it. Pax repeated the rule. Intent does not determine national effect. Worst customer service. Excellent memory. The next morning, back at the capital, Kira woke from a nightmare. She told me about it later, after she could say Milton's name without lowering her voice. In the dream, discarded tools crawled from a dark pit and pulled at her clothes. Milton stood among them, calling her useless and ordering them to drag her down. Then a bright figure wearing my face stepped between them and broke the hands reaching for her. Kira woke crying and demanded the first news from the western camp. A palace guard told her I was alive. Then he told her Milton was dead. The Ironcrest army had executed him after he confessed before the ranks. The guard also told her why I hit him. Milton had called her disposable in front of the army. Kira asked one question. Did Cameron hear what he called me? The guard answered that I had heard every word. Kira gripped the blanket until her hands stopped shaking. Then I'm done being his tool. The guard later repeated that line to me. Kira never denied it. 3 days later, in the throne hall, every faction that should have ruined me was behaving. Jordan stood below the throne with the northern generals. Hazel kept the treasury keys at her waist while her reports showed the court paying its bills. Maeve wore the royal Tudor robe and argued with doctors about her own treatment. Kira took her place at my right before the doors opened. Officials sat without checking Milton's empty chair. Every sabotage asset now looked permanent. You know your sabotage plan is cooked when the government starts paying bills on time. Disgusting. Wesley entered carrying a resignation letter. Jordan glanced at Milton's empty chair, then drew one thumb across his throat while looking at the Grand Chancellor. Wesley looked at the gesture, looked at me, and lost color. He dropped to one knee before I asked. 9-dimensional chest disease finally attacked its host. Wesley knelt. Your Majesty, my position has become a source of suspicion. I offer my resignation. The letter stayed in his hands. Denied, I answered. Wesley looked up. You haven't read it, told him. I survived one court system. I refuse to start another. Jordan coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. Wesley remained kneeling. Then what does your Majesty require? Answered. An enemy who does not work for me. The room quieted. Every internal enemy now stood on my side. I needed an external one. Southreach Kingdom was the rival kingdom my father had fought for years. The border tribes had armies. The Crimson Banner was the active threat. Northern rebels built from refugees our wars had created. I stood from the throne. I'm leaving the capital. Kira's eyes narrowed. With which army? I answered. None. Maeve folded her arms. That answer is rejected. Hazel touched the treasury keys. At least take travel money? Jordan smiled. Take guards, bad ones if that helps your plan. I looked at the court that had become far too invested in keeping me alive. The palace had become too loyal to ruin from inside, so I went looking for rebels. Their leader spotted the first lie before I finished it. 2 weeks later, Reese walked beside me on the North Road outside Crimson Banner territory. Wesley's invisible escort occupied half the trees. One guard wore a farmer's coat over palace boots. Another branch had been following us for 3 miles. Reese glanced uphill. Your Grand Chancellor understands hiding, correct? I looked at the moving branch. He understands it as a theory. A paper bird fluttered from another tree. Maeve's voice whispered through it. We can hear you. Reese did not look up. Good, feel embarrassed. The paper bird caught fire. Look, the protection rivalry paused for almost 10 seconds. I had refused an army because arriving with soldiers would ruin the rebel recruitment pitch. The court answered by sending one visible assassin and enough hidden guards to shake every branch. My disguise consisted of plain clothes, a cheap cloak, and the hope nobody had seen the Emperor recently. Reese still carried a sword like she wanted strangers to ask questions. You could slouch, I told her. Reese kept walking. You could stop standing like people owe you chairs. Fair. Apparently I had forgotten how commoners stood. 6 bandits stepped onto the road before noon. Their leader aimed a crossbow at my chest. Names. Business. Last chance. Reese's hand touched her sword. I raised one palm. I came to meet the Crimson Banner leader. The bandit laughed. People usually beg after we rob them. I'm trying to save time. His crossbow stayed level. Why would Ramona Wilder, our leader, meet you? There. The first useful name. Ramona Wilder led the Crimson Banner. It was the refugee army I wanted to point at my own dynasty. The palace dossier called her a healer and a mage. It also said she hated Royce for what its wars had done. I've got an offer against the Royce dynasty, I told him. The bandit's smile vanished. 3 crossbows shifted toward Reese. She looked offended by the quality of the aim. The leader ordered, drop the sword. Reese looked at me. I nodded. She handed over the weapon hilt first. The bandit taking it needed both hands and immediately reconsidered his career. I let them bind my wrists loosely. Reese leaned closer. If this goes badly, I am counting it as your fault. I'm the Emperor. That's the traditional system. The bandits marched us north. Behind us, the forest escort followed with the subtlety of a parade hiding in shrubbery. By sunset, inside Ramona Wilder's mountain hall, the rebel leader was eating scorpions and judging my posture. She sat sideways on a stone chair above a room full of wounded fighters, refugees, and stolen military maps. A shallow bowl rested beside her. She picked up a roasted scorpion by the tail, bit through it, and watched me flinch. Ramona smiled. Court stomach? I was respecting the presentation. Ramona lifted another scorpion. You looked scared, I answered. In my defense, dinner had armor. Her laugh came quick and sharp. Ramona was close to my age, dressed for travel, and built like she expected arguments to become physical. Her dark braid hung over one shoulder. A thin scar crossed her wrist above a healer's bracelet. She looked very good. I still had no intention of eating a scorpion. Reese noticed where I looked. Focus, Ramona heard her. Let him look. It may improve his answers. The scorpion-eating rebel queen stood and walked down the steps. She stopped close enough to tug the cheap edge of my cloak. This cloth is poor. The boots are custom. Those hands have never loaded a cart. Your guard watches exits before faces, Reese corrected her. I watch both. Ramona's eyes stayed on me. Who are you? I had prepared a respectable lie. I represent Southreach Kingdom. Ramona released my cloak. Southreach sent an envoy without papers? Papers burn. Names survive. I smiled. Call me a friend with useful enemies. Ramona circled once, studying how everyone moved around me. Even bound, I was still receiving too much space. Southreach nobles send owners, Ramona replied. Your friendliness is suspicious. She returned to her chair and pointed at the floor below it. Pitch! The bandits cut my wrists free. I had come to hire an army. Ramona demanded a reason before accepting a name, so I gave her the biggest reason in the world. What do you know about the dragon crown? She asked. I knew nothing. My face tried to hide that and lost. Ramona's smile widened. Every 5 centuries, the inheritance opens and judges anyone arrogant enough to enter. She tapped one map with the scorpion tail. Founder Elias Royce and his sworn brother Gareth Lorne won the last cycle. Elias took the greater power and founded the Royce dynasty. Gareth used the remainder to build Southreach. One inheritance had created 2 rival kingdoms. Ramona leaned forward. This cycle has returned. Whoever claims it can build the next world power. Rebel near the maps asked whether Ramona planned to claim it herself. Ramona crushed the empty scorpion shell between 2 fingers. I plan to keep my people alive. I will not spend refugees placing another spoiled ruler on a taller chair. Her fighters watched her instead of the maps. Their attention stayed on the lives she had promised to protect. I had come hoping she would attack Royce on command. Her refusal killed that route, but the Draken Crown opened a better one. A single rebel claimant could crush Royce faster than 10 corrupt ministers. Pax stayed silent, which meant the bracelet knew just enough to be useless. What would you do with it? I asked. Ramona's smile faded. The palace dossier had given me the public pieces. Emperor Henry's wars destroyed Ramona's home. An immortal taught her medicine and magic, and she built the crimson banner from refugees the courts abandoned. A child stirred behind the supply wall. Ramona checked the sound before she looked back at me. So I recycled every decent political opinion I had ever liked online. I would break hereditary land claims, I began. Families farming the ground should own enough to live. An older refugee near the wall stopped repairing a boot, I continued. Open trade roads. Teach children to read before nobles teach them to bow. Young mother pulled her son closer and looked toward Ramona. Then I gave them the dangerous promise. End the wars. Royce, Southreach, every border army. Nobody should burn another village to make one ruler look tall. Ramona stepped down one stair. You offer peace while asking rebels to attack a kingdom. I offer one war aimed at the people who keep starting 10, Ramona replied. That answer is convenient. It's also why I came without an army. I need allies who can refuse me. Reese glanced sideways. He has several! The nearest refugees laughed. Ramona did too, but her eyes stayed sharp. A wounded fighter lowered his cup. 2 guards stopped smirking. Ramona's fingers tightened around the scorpion tail until it cracked. The burned blankets outside the capital came back to me. I stopped smiling. Ramona came down from her chair again. She stopped directly in front of me. You want equality, land, schools, trade, and peace. Broadly, my policy training came from comment sections and bad deadlines. Ramona smiled, but her eyes stayed sharp. Her hand slid beneath my chin and tipped my face toward the light. You promise a future, Ramona murmured, but you keep watching to see whether I'll attack Royce for you. I smiled. Did it work? Ramona's thumb rested against my jaw. Ask me after you tell the truth. Behind the wall, paper rustled. A tiny listening charm had settled beneath the window. Wesley and Maeve were close enough to hear the pitch. The charm whispered in Wesley's voice. He means to rebuild the whole country. Maeve hissed. Lower your voice. Wesley whispered louder. The entire journey was an ideological test. 9-dimensional chess disease had crossed enemy lines. Ramona plucked the paper charm from the sill. Her gaze returned to me. Southreach executed its last equality reformer. Its nobles own the land, the trade gates, and most schools. An envoy promising to strip them would arrive without a head. The smiles around the hall disappeared. My respectable lie was finished. Ramona dropped the paper charm into my hand. Try again. I had one partial truth and several terrible options. I came from Royce territory. 3 guards drew blades. Rhys shifted between them and me, unarmed and plainly dangerous. Ramona lifted one finger. The guards stopped. I continued before the finger came down. I also want the Royce dynasty destroyed. Ramona studied me. A Royce official? Higher. Her eyes narrowed. I needed an insider famous enough to matter, hated enough to defect, and alive enough to blame later. Unfortunately, one was hiding outside while narrating my genius into stationery. I am Wesley Boone, I announced, Grand Chancellor of the Royce Dynasty. The paper charm went silent. Somewhere behind the wall, the real Wesley probably stopped breathing. Ramona looked over my face again. Wesley Boone is older, court lighting is cruel. Ramona tapped my cheek. He served for decades, I answered. I moisturize. Rhys closed her eyes. Ramona's mouth twitched. Rumors describe him as thin, severe, and terrifying. I spread my hands. The terrifying part survived. She moved closer. And the Emperor gave Cameron Royce the review he deserved. A selfish tyrant, lazy, shameless, surrounded by women, and determined to ruin the state. Rhys's eyes opened. Accurate enough. Ramona laughed once, then caught herself. I pressed the advantage. I escaped because Cameron will destroy Royce. Help me remove him first and I can hand you the dynasty from inside. Ramona held my gaze. If I believe you, what stops Wesley Boone from becoming another Emperor Henry? Nothing except your army, your terms, and the fact I'm standing unarmed in your hall. She looked at Rhys. Your guard is the weapon, Rhys answered. Only when required. Ramona smiled at her, then at me. You travel with dangerous women. I've got a type, Rhys replied. Your type is poor judgment. Ramona looked toward the window. Then why are your hidden friends listening? Ramona crushed the paper listener in her fist. A wave of force hit the wall behind it. Stone burst inward, dumping Maeve into the hall with a half-burned escape talisman. Wesley stumbled after her in a farmer's coat that had never fooled a living person. Maeve slapped the talisman against the floor. Light wrapped around both of them. Ramona snapped her fingers. The light folded shut like a bad umbrella. Maeve hit the floor. Wesley remained standing for one proud second, then 3 Crimson Banner guards forced him to his knees. Rhys moved toward him. Ramona's fighters raised spears. I caught Rhys's sleeve! Wait! She glared at me. You stole his identity in front of him. I was under pressure. Wesley looked at me from the floor. His expression showed betrayal, terror, and one humiliating second of admiration. I swear the man almost respected the commitment. Ramona picked up the paper listener and crouched before him. She glanced at me, then back at the real Grand Chancellor wearing a farmer's coat. I already have Wesley Boone, Ramona told him. The rebels leaned closer. Ramona lifted Wesley's chin with the scorpion tail. So who are you? Ramona's question hung in the mountain hall, and Wesley answered it by taking off his hat. The real Grand Chancellor knelt in rebel custody while I stood 10 feet away wearing his identity. He looked at me once. Then Wesley faced Ramona. I am Emperor Henry Royce. 2 rebels sat down without checking whether a seat existed. One missed and stayed on the floor. I had called myself Wesley Boone. Wesley had responded by becoming my dead father. You see the problem? The man had escalated identity theft into necromancy. Rhys moved before anyone else. Her hand closed around a captured spear. Do not use Emperor Henry's name. 3 Crimson Banner fighters aimed blades at her. I stepped between Rhys and the kneeling strategist. Captain, let the former Emperor explain. Rhys stared at me. Former? I'm supporting the lie. Poorly. Ramona lifted one hand. Speak, dead man. Wesley straightened on his knees. My sons tried to kill me after the court turned against them. Wesley Boone remained loyal and hid me outside the capital. He pointed at me. Apparently I was still Wesley. Good. One stable fact in a room full of nonsense. Ramona looked my way. And Cameron Royce? I insulted myself with professional accuracy. A spoiled tyrant. He stole Jordan's throne, destroyed the crown seal, filled the palace with women, and drove the dynasty toward civil war. Rhys's jaw tightened. I continued before she stabbed our cover. Jordan is no better. He marched south with an army. The 2 brothers will tear Royce apart if nobody replaces them. Ramona studied the fake father and fake minister. Convenient, she said. Wesley bowed his head. Useful. Ramona crossed the hall, drew Rhys's captured sword from a guard, and placed the edge against Wesley's throat. My home burned under Emperor Henry, she told him. Give me one reason I should not collect the debt now. Wesley did not move. I stepped beside the blade. Because killing a powerless old ruler gives you a body. Keeping him gives you 2 fighting sons, a divided court, and a claim you can sell. Ramona glanced at me. You defend him quickly. I defend useful problems, Reese muttered. That explains the court. Ramona lowered the sword 1 inch. That answer bought us 1 more breath. Wesley told me later what he remembered before choosing that lie. His father was a scholar who taught him that good men died forgotten while powerful men chose what history remembered. Then, war burned their village. Starving refugees dragged his father into the road. Young Wesley escaped through a drainage ditch with mud in his mouth and watched his father's hand vanish inside the crowd. After that, Wesley believed books were useless without authority. He climbed through the court, served Emperor Henry, and learned how cheaply rulers spent lives. When Henry died, Wesley ordered the failed physicians buried with him and joined Milton's coup before the body cooled. So when my stolen identity cornered him, Wesley chose the one identity Ramona could not ignore: the dead emperor. Back in Ramona's hall, she tapped 1 boot against the floor as the fake royal disaster finished. Ramona said, "I want Royce destroyed. Restoring its old emperor defeats the point." Wesley raised his head. "Then do not restore me." Ramona's eyes shifted to me. Wesley continued. "Place Wesley Boone on the throne. He has already promised land, schools, trade, and peace." The traitor had volunteered me for another throne while I was trying to escape the first one. I nodded anyway. Exposure still meant death. Ramona asked me, "Would Wesley destroy Cameron and Jordan?" I answered, "Happily." Reese whispered behind me. "You're enjoying this too much," I told her. "I rarely get to review myself honestly." Ramona stepped down and stopped in front of me. "Promises do not command armies." "A dead emperor commands even less," I replied. "Yet here we are." Her smile returned. Wesley reached inside his coat. Every spear lowered toward him. He slowly withdrew a square jade token and placed it on both palms. It was a ceremonial crown seal copy, used for succession rituals and diplomatic gifts. It was separate from the original seal I broke and Milton's forged death order copy. The object carried ceremonial recognition. It could make a succession story look lawful. Wesley offered it to Ramona. My blessing for the next ruler. Ramona took the ceremonial copy and turned it beneath the torchlight. She looked at the Royce crest, then at me. "You offer me a future emperor," Ramona said. "How do I know he stays useful after I give him an army?" I opened my mouth. Wesley answered first. "Marry him." Every face in the hall turned toward me. I looked at Wesley. He avoided eye contact with impressive discipline. Ramona rolled the ceremonial seal across her knuckles. "A marriage gives me a hand on the throne." "It gives you a husband," I corrected. Ramona stepped closer. "Are those different where you come from?" Reese muttered. "Run." Maeve, still on the floor beside Wesley, looked at my hands. "Don't touch her unless you have a medical plan." Ramona heard both women and smiled wider. She pressed the ceremonial seal against my chest. "Wesley Boone, will you marry me, help destroy Royce, and build the future you promised?" The offer was direct. So were the consequences. Marriage kept Reese, Maeve, and Wesley alive and put me inside the rebel coalition near the Dragon Crown. It also tied Ramona to a name that belonged to the man kneeling behind her. I looked at Reese, Maeve, and Wesley. "Yes," I answered. Ramona's gaze sharpened. "Say it like a man choosing." I held her eyes. "The alliance is my choice. So is the marriage." That was enough. Ramona tucked the ceremonial seal into her belt. Then she hooked one arm behind my knees and lifted me. I grabbed her shoulder. "You could let me walk," Ramona replied. "You lied twice before dinner." I protested. My legs were innocent. She answered, "Your lies damaged my trust." She carried me toward the inner rooms while the entire hall watched. Reese followed 3 steps. Ramona looked back. "Captain," he agreed. Reese stopped. "I know, I still hate your transportation method." Ramona adjusted me higher. "He seems comfortable." I told Reese, "This is propaganda." Maeve called after us. "Try not to trigger any unknown magical conditions." I pointed at her. That advice arrived several disasters late. The door closed behind us. I had chosen the marriage, and Ramona made the alliance very real. The rest stayed behind that door. She proved enthusiastic, strategic, and completely unconcerned with my recovery schedule. At sunrise, outside Ramona's room, Reese was still glaring while I leaned against the wall to stay upright. Ramona walked out behind me looking rested enough to start another rebellion. She examined my attempt at standing. "The future ruler appears fragile." In my defense, the treaty negotiations were aggressive. Ramona leaned close. "You didn't complain last night." Reese looked toward the ceiling like she wanted Emperor Henry to return and fix this personally. Maeve arrived with a medicine pouch. Her eyes moved from Ramona to me. "Do you need treatment?" Maeve asked. Ramona answered, "He needs breakfast." I accepted both. Wesley waited beside the outer wall without his farmer's coat. The fake dead emperor looked far too satisfied with the mess he had created. When the women moved ahead, he lowered his voice. "Cameron, if you reach the Dragon Crown, build the world you described." I looked at him. Those were recycled forum opinions. Wesley's expression stayed serious. Use them anyway. Nobody will ask which forum gave them to you. He had handed his ambition to the man who stole his name and married under it. 9-dimensional chess had become a hostage situation. That afternoon, inside the coalition cavern, Ramona showed me the army she refused to hand anyone for free. Rebel chiefs, border warlords, displaced nobles, and refugee commanders filled stone platforms around a central floor. They had gathered for one reason: the Dragon Crown inheritance would open soon. Ramona took the highest platform. I stood beside her because marriage apparently included dangerous seating. She addressed the coalition. The Dragon Crown belongs to whoever proves strongest. The Crimson Banner will support the winner. A border chief pointed at me. You married a claimant before announcing a fair contest. Ramona looked at me. My husband receives the same gate, the same trials, and the same chance to die. Nodded. Romance remains alive. Ramona gave the coalition our cover in one brutal sentence. I was Wesley Boone, her new husband and a Dragon Crown claimant. The older man beside us was the supposedly dead Emperor Henry Royce. Whispers raced across the platforms. Wesley accepted the attention while everyone used the wrong name for him. A few chiefs objected. Ramona ate another scorpion until they finished. Nobody interrupted the chewing. I looked over the gathered forces and saw enough enemies to destroy the Royce dynasty. Wesley looked over the same room and saw the beginning of a world government. We needed separate hobbies. Shouting broke out near the entrance. Nico Barrett, Ramona's smiling mutineer and ambitious subordinate, walked in carrying a covered bundle by the hair. He bowed to Ramona with perfect respect and rolled the bundle across the floor. The cloth fell away. Prince Dorian Kestrel's severed head stopped below the central platform. Dorian had been Southreach's top claimant and one of its strongest generals. His Dragon Crown campaign ended before he reached the gate. Nico smiled. The prince lacked the strength to lead. I removed the delay. Several chiefs shifted away from Nico. Nobody mistook the head for loyalty. Ramona looked down at him. You killed a guest! I removed a weak claimant for the coalition! Ramona's face stayed flat. That tiny failure made Nico's smile tighter. Before he could push harder, the Plains faction entered. Kendall Dune walked at its center. She was the Plains' sacred maiden, a young woman whose calm voice made armed men lean closer before she finished speaking. Silver ornaments framed her dark hair. A broad-shouldered man with a chain around one wrist followed behind her. A Plains attendant met Kendall at the steps and whispered our public cover. Her eyes moved from Ramona to Wesley, the alleged Emperor Henry, then to me. Kendall looked at Dorian's head, Nico's bow, Ramona's platform, and every rebel chief in the cavern. Then she smiled. This coalition is trash, Kendall announced. The insult hit several hundred egos at once. A rebel chief reached for his sword. Kendall kept speaking. You fight over borders because none of you can imagine one world under one ruler. Join me, and your separate wars end. Her voice carried across the cavern. The angry chief's hand slowed. Nico's tight smile relaxed. Fighters who had hated her first sentence began nodding at the second. Something pressed at the edge of my thoughts. I wanted to agree. Then the pressure left me. Pax flashed one useless line. Profile unavailable. Kendall looked straight at me. She tilted her head. Anyone resisting me can call it a skill issue, I finished. The word left my mouth before ancient common sense could stop it. Kendall's smile disappeared. Nobody else in the cavern understood the phrase. She did. The chained man behind her looked toward me. A furious rebel charged Kendall from the side. Her companion moved first. Grim, Kendall's wolf-raised enforcer, caught the attacker by the chest and threw him across the cavern. Two more rebels rushed in. Grim broke their formation with one sweep and drove both into the stone. Nobody else rushed her. Kendall pointed at me. Her eyes sharpened. Grim, she ordered. Kill the one man. My voice did not move. Inside the coalition cavern, Kendall's voice changed Ramona before anyone drew a second weapon. Grim had already thrown 3 challengers across the stone. Kendall pointed at me, and Ramona stepped between us. For half a second, I thought my new wife planned to protect me. Then Kendall spoke. Ramona, everyone here knows the Royce family burned your home. The former emperor is 10 steps away. Ramona's shoulders tightened. Her eyes moved past me to Wesley, who was still pretending to be Emperor Henry Royce. Kendall's voice softened. You built the Crimson Banner to destroy his dynasty. Finish the first piece now. Ramona drew a curved blade. Wesley's confidence vanished when Ramona drew the blade. I caught Ramona's wrist before she reached him. She turned the blade toward me. Move, husband. That title had become dangerous quickly. I held on. You spared him yesterday. I was wrong yesterday. Kendall smiled from across the cavern. Kill the old emperor, then remove anyone protecting him. Ramona's blade pressed toward my ribs. The rebels around us watched without blinking. Kendall was repeating the anger they already felt. Only then did Pax give me something useful. Kendall needed to speak. Her voice pulled on desires already inside the listener. A target had to want something first. A stronger conflicting desire could break the command. 3 rules. 1. Opening. Ramona wanted Royce destroyed. She also wanted the refugees alive and the wars ended. I shoved her blade aside. You kept him alive because the royal civil war could end Royce faster. Ramona struck again. I blocked her wrist with both hands. Kill him now, and you lose the succession weapon. Kendall gains the coalition while you gain 1 corpse. Kendall called across the room. Revenge doesn't need permission. Looked Ramona in the eyes. Peace does. Her blade slowed. I pressed the contradiction before Kendall could smooth it over. You promised to support the strongest Dragon Crown claimant. Kendall just ordered you to destroy your best weapon before the contest begins. Ramona's fingers shook. Kendall raised her voice. He is protecting the family that ruined you, answered louder. I'm protecting the plan you chose. Ramona looked at the refugees along the cavern wall. 1 wounded fighter clutched the medicine pouch she had given him. A child stood behind his mother and watched Ramona's blade. Ramona's fingers opened. The weapon dropped. She fell to 1 knee, breathing like she had run uphill. Kendall's hold on the room broke. Several rebels blinked and stepped away from Kendall. Her perfect smile tightened. I crouched beside Ramona. Still want to kill me? Ramona looked up. For several reasons. Good, that sounds like you. She grabbed my collar and pulled me close. Don't enjoy this. In my defense, surviving my wife's first murder attempt feels romantic. Ramona shoved me away, but she was smiling again. For 3 seconds, nobody obeyed Kendall. Ramona pushed herself upright and reclaimed the curved blade. She planted 1 foot beside mine. You saved my mind, she told me. Don't make that a habit. I hate owing husbands. I accept repayment in armies. Ramona cut me a look. Ask after you survive. Naturally, Kendall used the wolf brute. Grim, Kendall ordered. Break them. Grim charged. Maeve stepped in first, the touch-sensitive prodigy carrying a thick stack of talismans. She slapped 2 seals together. A wall of blue fire hit Grim in the chest and drove him sideways. Reese recovered her sword from a rebel guard and caught Grim's swinging chain on the blade. The weighted end snapped around a pillar instead of my skull. Reese barked, Cameron, move! I pulled Ramona behind the platform as Grim tore free. Maeve threw a binding seal around his legs. Reese drove the flat of her blade into his jaw. Ramona slashed the chain from his wrist and kicked the weighted end away from a wounded rebel. For 1 clean moment, the 3 women forced him backward. Kendall watched without panic. She touched the black clasp at Grim's throat. Enough restraint. The clasp broke. Grim's body surged larger. Dark hair covered his arms and shoulders. His hands hooked into claws and his eyes went empty. The released form hit Maeve before her next talisman opened. Grim slammed her through a low table. Wood burst beneath her back. Reese cut toward his throat. He caught her sword arm, threw her across the central floor, and sent her shoulder into stone. Both women tried to rise. Grim reached Maeve first. I drove a fallen spear shaft between them. Grim snapped it with 1 hand and knocked me across the floor. I did not have a joke for that one. Ramona tried to stand. Her legs failed after Kendall's control. 5 rebel leaders chose that moment to discover courage. They stepped onto the floor in matching confidence and completely different outfits. 1 declared Grim a beast unworthy of the Dragon Crown. Another promised to kill him in 3 moves. The 5th had not finished introducing himself when Grim hit the group. 4 bodies landed together. The 5th bounced off the platform and joined them. They had entered like final bosses and became floor decorations. Look, the threat was real. The rescue committee was cooked. Grim turned back toward me. Maeve pushed herself upright beside the broken table. Blood marked 1 corner of her mouth. Her hands shook too hard to form another seal. Reese held 1 arm against her injured shoulder. She looked at Maeve, then at me. I knew that expression. Reese had seen the banquet explosion and knew my touch could make Maeve collapse. She also knew another woman touching me afterward could trigger the jealousy surge. Touch was still a weapon. Terrible system, excellent callback. Reese dragged me beside Maeve. Same trick, Reese ordered. Maeve stared at her. Absolutely not. Grim charged across the floor. Reese asked, Maeve, yes or no? Maeve looked at the claws, looked at me, and grabbed my collar. Do it. That counted. I caught Maeve around the waist and kissed her, her whole body locked. The kiss lasted 1 sharp second. Then Maeve collapsed against me, just like she had at the banquet. Kendall laughed. That's your answer? It's the setup, I told her. I lowered Maeve beside the platform and stepped into Kendall's reach. Kendall laughed and stepped close enough to inspect me herself. She placed 2 fingers under my chin. You resisted my voice. That makes you valuable. I let her touch me. Maeve's eyes opened. Heat rolled across the cavern. Every unused talisman at her waist ignited. Maeve rose behind me, hair lifting in the pressure, her gaze fixed on Kendall's hand. Take your fingers off, my man. Kendall looked back. Too late. Maeve threw 1 blazing seal into Grim's chest. The blast carried the berserk brute across the floor and buried him beneath the broken platform. Stone cracked. The wolf form tried to rise and failed. Maeve crossed the distance to Kendall in 2 steps. Kendall lifted one hand and started to speak. Maeve hit her before the first command formed. The strike threw Kendall toward Reese. Reese caught her from behind and pressed a knife to her throat with the uninjured hand. The entire coalition watched its sacred maiden lose her voice, her monster, and her audience in under 10 seconds. Beautiful. Maeve tried to reach Kendall again. I caught Maeve's wrist carefully. We need her alive for 3 more breaths. Maeve looked at Kendall. She touched you, answered. I noticed. Maeve's eyes narrowed. You allowed it. I said, I was creating the reaction. Maeve tightened her grip. I'm still reacting. Fair. Reese tightened the knife. Give me a reason not to finish this. Kendall forced her smile back. I looked at the rebels still rubbing their heads and Ramona still recovering beside the platform. Kendall could turn any existing obsession into a weapon. Leaving her alive seemed insane. I took Reese's sword. Kendall watched the blade rise. Then she quoted the last sentence I had written on Earth. You said ancient life failed because it had cold water, bad medicine, and 0 Wi-Fi. My sword stopped. Nobody in this world should have known that sentence. I had written it on Earth hours before I woke beside my father's coffin. Kendall smiled carefully. Still dramatic, Knight Emperor? The forearm handle hit harder than the magic. I lowered the sword. Reese looked at me. You know her? I might. Ramona rose behind us. That answer needs work. I looked at Kendall. What was your handle? She answered. Past perfect. There she was. The stranger from my last Earth argument stood in front of me. She had grown into a woman who brainwashed my wife and tried to feed me to a wolf brute. For 2 weeks, Earth had been a memory only I could verify. Kendall's handle made it real again, and I hated how much relief hit me. Naturally, Earth's one familiar face had just tried to feed me to a wolf. I told Reese, do not kill her. Kendall smiled. Good choice. I looked at Ramona. I need a room where nobody can hear her. Ramona folded her arms. For interrogation? Yeah. Her gaze moved between Kendall and me. Only interrogation? Kendall laughed softly. He used to spend hours arguing with me. Ramona's eyebrow lifted. That reassurance made it worse. An hour later, in a soundproof storage room, Kendall sat tied to a chair because speech was her loaded gun. I stayed beyond kicking range. I gave Kendall the minimum truth. My real name here is Cameron Royce. I'm the Emperor Ramona wants dead. Wesley Boone is my cover. Kendall looked me over. So Knight Emperor actually became an emperor. Hate that you get to enjoy the username. Kendall smiled. You chose it. I told her I was younger. She replied. You chose it months ago. Cruel. Accurate. I asked. What did the pop-up ask us? Kendall repeated the question about choosing an old dynasty. What happened after you answered? I spilled a drink on my keyboard, Kendall replied. Then I woke here as a baby. Told her I had arrived inside an adult prince 2 weeks ago. Kendall leaned back. So, I survived childhood here, and you skipped straight to Emperor. I also inherited 2 murder ministers. Skill issue. There was the forum tyrant. Kendall lowered her voice. We should work together. Take the dragon crown with me. You hated this world before either of us arrived. I want one world under someone competent. Which one of us is competent? Kendall smiled. I was being polite. Her voice pressed into my head again. Untie me, Knight Emperor. My hand moved toward the knot. I grabbed the folded cloth from the table instead and tied it across her mouth. The pressure vanished. Kendall's eyes widened with pure offended royalty. I leaned back. Customer feedback. Your power needs a mute button, she shouted into the gag. Clearer already. The gag was the only restraint I added. I kept asking questions, and Kendall answered with nods, headshakes, and increasingly personal gestures. When I brought her outside, the entire coalition saw a furious sacred maiden leave a soundproof room tied and gagged beside me. To the coalition, the gag looked personal. Whispers raced through the cavern before we reached Ramona. Ramona looked Kendall over, then hooked one arm around my shoulders. He looked more exhausted after one night with me, Ramona announced. Kendall made a strangled sound behind the cloth. Maeve's eyes narrowed again. Reese rubbed her injured shoulder and stared at the ceiling. A messenger ran into the cavern before the misunderstanding became a civil war. The Dragon Crown entrance has opened. At dawn, on the wasteland beyond the mountain base, the ground split beneath 158 contenders. A golden gate rose from the dust. The rebels rushed forward while every alliance, grudge, and fake identity came with them. I followed because one of those claimants might finally gain enough power to destroy Royce. The Dragon Crown opened for 158 contenders. I planned to fail the first test with greed. That decision became embarrassing before it became dangerous. Inside the Dragon Crown, the first corridor opened into treasure rooms, and 158 adults forgot dignity. The golden gate sealed behind us. Stone doors rose on both sides. Every room held weapons, medicine, armor, or technique scrolls. Kendall's gag had come off before entry. Reese and Ramona watched her mouth like it was another weapon. I had entered with one plan: be greedier than everyone, fail the ruler test, go home eventually. Simple. Then the first rebel punched another man over a jeweled spear. A woman kicked open a chest and buried both arms in gold. Two faction leaders started arguing over a blade before either had drawn it. The Dragon Crown had gathered the world's strongest claimants and turned them into shoppers during a clearance sale. I respected the honesty. Ramona caught me tying an empty treasure sack around my waist. "Husband, what are you doing?" I told Ramona, losing with commitment. Kendall lifted one eyebrow. "The inheritance is watching," I told Kendall. "That's why I need witnesses." I ran into the largest room and started collecting everything I could carry. A short sword went into the sack, then medicine, then a stack of sealed manuals. I put a bronze treasure pot on my head because both hands were full. One broad claimant grabbed the sack from behind. "Drop it, pretty husband." I turned with the pot still on my head. "You insulted the marriage before introducing yourself. Amateur mistake." He pulled harder. I released the strap, let him stumble backward, and kicked the chest behind his knees. The man hit the floor. I took the sack, his belt knife, and the jeweled cup he had tucked inside his coat. Ramona watched from the doorway. "Did you need his cup?" I told Ramona. No. That made it important. The claimant lunged again. Reese placed one boot on his wrist without looking away from the moving walls. Maeve stared at me through the bandages around her ribs. "You look ridiculous." I adjusted the pot. "It's imperial fashion." Reese tested her wrapped shoulder and pointed toward the moving wall. "Your fashion is about to crush you." The stone behind me had started closing. That was the first real rule. The chamber killed greedy claimants. The walls didn't stop for surrender. A rebel near the far wall hugged a chest and refused to let go. The doorway narrowed around him. His allies screamed for him to drop it. He held tighter. The stone closed. Another claimant reached beneath a descending gate for one last sword. The gate pinned his sleeve, then dragged him under when the floor shifted. People stopped laughing. For 3 breaths, everyone understood the price. Then half of them grabbed faster. Look, greed survives terrible reviews. The corridor folded behind us, floors tilted. Treasure rooms slammed shut one after another while claimants fought over the exits. I kept the sack. I also kept moving. Reese's injured shoulder made her old sword too heavy, so I threw her a lighter blade from my pile. She caught it with her good hand and cut a trapped guard free. Maeve's talisman paper had burned during the fight with Grimm. I shoved a fresh stack into her arms. She slapped one sheet against a closing door and held it open long enough for 3 people to escape. Ramona received the medicine case. Wesley got a sealed military manual he had been pretending not to stare at. Wesley caught it against his chest. "You selected resources by function." I tapped the sack. I selected the expensive things first. Wesley nodded. "Exactly. A ruler preserves the central reserve, then equips specialists." 9-dimensional chest disease had entered a treasure dungeon. Kendall reached for a silver chain hanging from my sack. "And what specialist gets this?" I pulled it away. "Me. I specialize in having more than you." Her smile sharpened. "Still 12 years old online," I told Kendall, still trying to steal my loot offline. Ramona took the medicine case from me. "You gave your wife medicine and your rival an insult," I told Ramona. "I distribute according to need." The next wall dropped before she could answer. We cleared it by seconds. Behind us, the remaining rooms collapsed into solid stone. The noise lasted long enough to count the missing people. More than 100 of the 158 entrants never reached the central hall. The survivors arrived carrying what they had saved. Some had one weapon, some had nothing. I had 2 sacks, the bronze pot, and enough valuables to start a small civil war. Every surviving claimant looked at me. Finally, public disgust. This test understood me. A deep voice rolled through the hall. "Possession trial complete. Wealth gathered for followers. Imperial qualification confirmed." I looked behind me. Nobody stood there. The voice continued. "Crown aura granted." Golden light erupted around my body. It climbed from my boots, wrapped my shoulders, and formed a bright crown shape above my head. The bronze pot stayed underneath it. The combination was criminal. Rebels who had been ready to fight me lowered their weapons. 3 claimants who had ignored one another stepped back together. The broad man whose cup I stole reached for his knife, remembered I had also stolen that, and moved behind somebody taller. A rebel elder bowed before he seemed to notice himself doing it. 2 others copied him. The survivors had entered as equal claimants. The Dragon Crown had just placed me above them in glowing letters. Ramona stared at the light. "My husband is glowing." Maeve looked at the pot. "The crown has competition." Kendall's smile disappeared. She had entered as the sacred maiden everyone feared. Now the inheritance had placed a giant target over my head and called it approval. Wesley opened the military manual with reverent hands. "You allowed everyone to reveal their greed, kept the best resources, then strengthened your chosen people." The trial recognized imperial generosity. I told Wesley, "I kept most of it." Wesley nodded. "A ruler must maintain reserves." I genuinely couldn't lose an argument against a man willing to improve both sides. I asked the bracelet the important question. What does the crown aura do? The bracelet answered inside my head. Crown aura, visible claimant status, morale influence detected, direct combat increase, 0. I sighed. So it looks expensive. Direct? I asked. Does it include Wi-Fi? Worst customer service. Now with decorative lighting, the surviving claimants stopped looking at the treasure. They looked at me. The chamber had killed most of the field. My greed had made me its glowing favorite. Another perfect failure. Then the floor vanished. A second later, I stood inside a command tent outside Blackridge Fortress. 20,000 soldiers waited for my orders. 5,000 defenders held the fortress. More than 5,000 of my soldiers were already sick. The numbers appeared on a war mat for one breath. Then a coughing fit outside the tent made them human. Every third row of tents held feverish men. Medics moved between carts until one collapsed against a wheel. Healthy soldiers covered their mouths and watched the fortress walls. The map burned one name over the enemy position: Merrick Vex, Blackridge's plague commander. Pax gave me one short warning. Military simulation active. Defeated commanders may be ejected. Scenario injuries remain real until ejection. Good. The first chamber killed people. This one only made losing hurt first. Wesley studied the map. Maeve had wrapped Reese's shoulder before the gate opened, and both women could move again, though neither looked fresh. Wesley tapped the sick camps. We have more troops. Blackridge has stronger walls and a plague army cannot assault them. I waited for the reasonable option. Wesley pointed at the siege engines. Load the infected dead into the catapults. Throw them over the walls. Their own city will become the weapon. A feverish soldier outside the tent heard him. The man's hand tightened around the blanket covering his friend. The room stopped being funny. Wesley had offered the fastest route to victory. It also used sick soldiers as ammunition after they died. I walked to the map and swept the siege markers onto the floor. No corpses. Wesley looked at me. Then the fortress is almost impossible to take. I answered. Excellent. I stepped outside before he could turn that into philosophy. The nearest officers straightened beneath the crown aura. They expected a grand command from the glowing claimant wearing a treasure pot. I gave them retreat, break camp, move toward the river. One officer glanced at the sick tents. What about the infected? I pointed toward the carts. All of them come, the officer warned. The wounded will slow the column. I answered. Then the column moves slowly. I pointed at the medics. Load them first. Healthy soldiers carry anyone who cannot walk. A sick cavalryman tried to stand from a cart. Commander, I can still ride. His knees folded before the sentence finished. I caught his arm and put him back on the blanket. Today you specialize in cargo. The man looked ashamed. I pointed toward his horse. Keep breathing. You can argue with me at the river. A healthy rider took the reins instead. 3 more soldiers started lifting patients without waiting for another command. Wesley followed me outside. You're forcing Merrick to abandon his walls and pursue. Kept walking. I'm leaving. Wesley followed. You preserved the army before the plague could finish it. I looked back. I'm trying to lose. Wesley's eyes brightened. A false retreat with moral camouflage. I told him, please stop upgrading my failure in public. The officers heard him anyway. One looked toward Blackridge, then toward the sick men being lifted onto carts. His suspicion changed into respect before I could prevent it. Maeve and Reese took a small force ahead to hide along the road we expected Merrick to use. Their job was simple: let the pursuit pass, then hit the rear. Reese tested the lighter sword I had given her. Try not to create another emergency before we return. I looked at the 5,006 soldiers. I told Reese, no promises. By dusk, the siege camp was empty. 20,000 troops moved toward the river, carrying every sick man, every wounded soldier, and every medic we had. I intended to retreat until the Dragon Crown called me a coward and threw me out. I learned afterward that Ramona's parallel trial opened with the same plague. She chose the opposite kind of failure. Ramona moved from bed to bed and healed one soldier at a time. She organized the medics and promised nobody would be abandoned. Her strength dropped with every life she stabilized. Kendall later admitted her version showed the same fortress, the same infected army, and the same siege engines. She looked at the catapults. Behind Blackridge's walls, Merrick Vex waited. While my army moved toward the river, Kendall's parallel force reached Blackridge first. She told me the details after the trial threw her out. Naturally, she described the disaster like the fortress had cheated. Kendall chose the same corpse plan Wesley had proposed in under a minute. Nico Barrett, Ramona's smiling mutineer, agreed immediately. He stood well behind the catapult while the crews argued. Their soldiers didn't agree. The crews stood beside wrapped bodies and refused to load them. Some knew the dead, others knew they might be next. One gray-haired soldier blocked the first catapult. Those are our men. Nico stepped close enough to make the threat public. They're already dead. Do you plan to join them before becoming useful? The soldier held his ground. 3 more crews stopped working behind him. Kendall walked between the siege engines and let her voice spread. You want victory, she told them. You want your family safe. Load the catapults and end this war. The gray-haired soldier's hands moved against his will. His face stayed furious while he lifted the first wrapped body. The soldier's fear of Blackridge became obedience. One by one, they loaded the infected dead. Nico watched the first launch and smiled. Mercy is expensive, Kendall answered. Winning is cheaper. That line aged badly before the bodies landed. The plague spread over Blackridge's walls. Defenders vanished from the battlements, and the gates opened without resistance. Look, an empty fortress after a plague attack should scare anyone. Kendall marched through the open gates like she had already won. Kendall's army cheered. Nico led the first troops inside because he wanted witnesses for the victory. The streets were empty. Doors hung open. The defenders had vanished. Even the wounded were gone. Then the gates slammed shut. Black smoke poured from the alleys. Hidden soldiers appeared on rooftops. The same sickness Kendall had thrown over the walls rolled back through her own ranks. Merrick Vex stepped onto a tower above the gate. The plague commander wore a dark coat and the relaxed smile of a man whose enemy had delivered herself. Merrick called down, "Thank you for bringing fresh bodies. Mine were getting difficult to move." Kendall ordered archers to fire. Half were already coughing. The other half couldn't see through the smoke. Merrick had left the city looking weak so the ruthless claimant would enter it. Nico's smile finally died. Kendall ordered a retreat, but panicked soldiers jammed the gate. Men clawed over one another while Merrick's defenders struck from above. Her clever shortcut had delivered the entire army into the plague commander's hands. Kendall pushed through the crowd and raised her voice again. "Hold the streets! Sacrifice yourselves! I will finish Merrick!" The command hit soldiers who wanted one thing more than victory. They wanted to live. Kendall's power amplified existing desire. Survival remained stronger than her command. The front rank kept running. A soldier she had controlled all morning knocked her hand away from his face. Another shouted for everyone to stop listening. Men covered their ears and shoved past her toward the walls. The gray-haired soldier tore the command sash from Kendall's waist and threw it into the plague smoke. Nico ordered the men back into formation. Nobody looked at him. His authority had depended on Kendall's voice, and that voice was losing the argument to survival. Kendall repeated the order until her voice broke. She dropped to one knee as the soldiers she had treated like ammunition turned their backs. Only then did the dragon crown eject her. The city disappeared. Kendall woke outside the simulation with no army and no victory. The last thing she heard was thousands of soldiers cursing her. Fake authority met a stronger desire and folded. Beautiful system design. Ramona's route lasted longer. She told me afterward that she spent the first hours moving between sick tents. Her healing magic lowered fevers, slowed the plague, and kept the worst patients breathing. Then another row of soldiers collapsed. Ramona organized every medic she had. She gave away her own medicine. She promised the patients she would reach them all. Her hands started shaking before the camp stopped growing. Ramona had built the Crimson Banner by saving people abandoned by rulers. Walking past a sickbed was never going to be easy for her, so she kept healing until she could barely stand. Then Ramona saw the same truth Kendall had found inside Blackridge. Merrick controlled the plague. Saving one soldier at a time would never catch him. She left the medical camp and attacked the fortress herself. Ramona crossed the wall, reached Merrick, and forced him into direct combat. Her first strike cut his sleeve. Her second drove him backward across the command platform. Merrick noticed her shaking hand. "You spent everything saving soldiers who were built to die." Ramona attacked again. "That's why you'll never command mine." Merrick stopped smiling. Ramona's body failed before her next strike. He knocked the curved blade from her hand. Ramona tried to rise, failed, and woke outside the trial with a medicine pouch still clenched in her fist. Dozens of soldiers were stable. Thousands remained sick. Ramona had no strength left. Kendall woke outside with soldiers cursing her. Ramona woke outside gripping medicine. "Back in my route, I still had an army." By midday, the column reached the river bridge. The bridge was narrow enough for one medical cart at a time. The water below moved fast, and the old supports shook under every wagon. A medic pointed behind us before I could study the bridge longer. The fever had spread to soldiers who had never entered the sick camp. Pax drew one red line across my vision. It ran from Blackridge to every new infection. External plague control confirmed. Source remains inside Blackridge Fortress. Wesley looked back toward the distant walls. The empty city was the trap. I nodded. "Good thing I ran away before discovering it personally." Wesley's eyes brightened. "You read Merrick's intention from the sick count." I pointed at the carts. "I read the part where 5,000 people were dying," Wesley answered. "You preserved the only army capable of fighting after the trap failed." I told him I was retreating. Wesley lowered his voice with great seriousness. "The finest retreats resemble surrender," I told him. "Stop narrating my masterpiece before it exists." Then the first medical cart creaked onto the bridge and the joke stopped. I ordered the medics across first, then the sickest soldiers, then the wounded. A feverish cavalryman gave his place on the next cart to a man who could no longer sit upright. The rider held the wheel steady while the worst patient crossed. I had called these people simulation troops when the test began. That stopped being funny. A scenario officer approached my horse. "Commander, your crossing is ready." I looked at the cart still waiting. "My crossing happens last," the officer warned. "The army needs its commander alive." I pointed toward the medics. "The army also needs medics. Move them!" The officer stood there for one breath, then saluted and carried the order himself. Word moved down the column. They had watched the glowing claimant refuse the corpse plan. They had watched me carry the sick. Now I would not cross before them. Men who could barely stand started watching me instead of Blackridge. One sick soldier knelt beside his cart. "Commander, you didn't leave us." Another lowered his spear. "Our lives are yours." Medic tried to pull the first man upright. He refused until I looked at him. "Stand," I ordered. He obeyed, then pressed his fist to his chest. The men behind him copied the gesture. The words spread through the ranks. Soldiers struck fists against shields and called me a true commander. Some cried openly. Others helped the sick onto carts faster because they wanted my turn to come. I had ordered a losing retreat. They treated it like a promise. Wesley watched the army choose me and whispered, "You made loyalty before battle." I did not answer him. Their loyalty had taken away my clean escape. A horn sounded from the rear. Enemy cavalry appeared along the river road far earlier than our scouts predicted. The last medical carts were still crossing. I looked toward the trees where Maeve and Reese should have sprung the ambush. Nothing moved. The cavalry had come down the river road. I had sent Maeve and Reese to hide along the road from Blackridge. They were on the wrong side of the field. Whatever they did next, they couldn't reach us before impact. The enemy charge grew louder. I pointed across the river. "Everyone over, now!" The scenario officer stepped in front of my horse. "Commander, cross with the next cart." I answered, "No!" He handed the reins to another soldier. "Then forgive us." The healthy infantry turned away from the bridge. They formed a wall between me and the cavalry. 6 soldiers who hadn't crossed joined them. Men with fever leaned on spears. Wounded riders mounted because standing still hurt less than watching me stay. I rode toward the line. "Break formation and cross!" Nobody moved. The officer faced me. "You carried us this far. We'll buy your crossing." I snapped. "I didn't ask for that." The officer answered, "You didn't ask before saving us." The cavalry lowered its lances. Behind me, the final medical cart cleared the bridge. The soldiers had turned my own refusal back on me. They planned to die so I could escape. The bridge was the only way out. I drew my sword and turned toward its main support. My sword hit the bridge's main support. My first cut split the outer rope. The second made every soldier behind me shout. By then, the last medical cart had reached the far bank. Only the men who had chosen to stay remained beside me. I cut again. The support snapped. The bridge twisted, dropped into the river, and took my only escape with it. Across the river, medics ran to the broken edge. One feverish soldier tried to step into the water. 2 patients held him back. The people I had sent to safety could only watch the rest of us turn around. For one breath, even the enemy cavalry slowed. My soldiers turned from the broken bridge to me. I faced the men I had called simulation pieces when this trial began. "I came into this battle planning to use you," I told them. "That ends here." The scenario officer tried to interrupt. I raised the sword. "Nobody dies buying my escape. We stand together." The officer looked at the river, then at the cavalry. He struck his fist against his chest. The whole line answered. 20,000 had looked impressive on the war map. The sick men still beside me made the number feel real. They turned their spears toward the enemy. The cavalry commander recovered first. He raised his lance and laughed across the field. "Your plague army has trapped itself." Look, he had enough time to reconsider. He used it to laugh. I walked to the front, "Then come collect us." He lowered the lance. The cavalry charged. My soldiers formed a spear wall 3 ranks deep, men with fever-locked shoulders beside healthy infantry. Wounded riders held shields where their arms still worked. The scenario officer tried to move the sickest men behind the line. One old spearman stepped back into place before the order finished. "You crossed last," he told me. "So do we." The officer looked at me. I nodded once. Healthy soldiers closed around the old man and made the wall strong enough to hold him. The crown aura spread behind me in a gold haze. Pax had classified the crown aura as status and morale only. Every soldier could see the bright crown over the commander who had cut off his own escape. Their spears stopped shaking. Wesley reached my side as the ground started trembling. "You turned the bridge into an oath." I kept my eyes on the cavalry. "I cut it because nobody listens," Wesley continued. "You removed retreat from both the soldiers and yourself." I answered, "Please keep your masterpiece commentary under the sound of the horses." Then the horses reached us. The enemy expected sick men to break before contact. Our front rank dropped 1 knee. Spears came over their shoulders from the second rank, while the third braced every shaft against the ground. Horses crashed into a wall that didn't move. 3 spear shafts snapped. 2 soldiers went down beneath shields. The men behind them filled the gaps before the cavalry could see daylight. A rider broke through on my left and swung at the feverish spearman. I caught the reins, dragged the horse sideways, and gave the old man enough room to drive his spear upward. The rider fell. Our old spearman stayed standing. Then the first enemy rank flew from their saddles. Riders behind them tried to turn and collided with the men still charging. My soldiers pushed forward together. The easy massacre disappeared. One of our wounded men laughed through split lips. 3 more joined him. The enemy heard sick men mocking them after the first charge. The cavalry commander shouted for another charge, but his riders had seen feverish men hold the first one. Some obeyed slower. 2 looked back toward Blackridge. The scenario officer beside me lifted his spear. "Commander, the line holds," I told him. "Then make it advance." The sick army stepped over broken lances and drove the cavalry away from the bridge. The cavalry commander tried to rally his men beside the river. Nobody wanted to be the first rider back into those spears. He slapped one soldier across the helmet and ordered him forward. The rider looked at our wall, looked at the broken bridge, and backed away from his own commander instead. Merrick had promised his riders an easy kill. After the first charge, they stopped believing him. Pax flashed a new rule inside my vision. Temporary scenario scaling active. Battlefield commitment may raise combat output until the trial ends. My body felt lighter. The sword stopped dragging at my shoulder. I could read the cavalry's movements before they completed them. Temporary. Of course. My first useful upgrade came with an expiration date. At the front, Merrick sent infantry after the failed cavalry. The plague commander rode behind them beneath a black command banner. His remaining troops stayed in reserve around him. Merrick called across the field. "Your men are dying while you make them cheer." A sick soldier beside me coughed into his sleeve, raised his spear and shouted back, "We're still here!" The line repeated it. Merrick's smile tightened. He ordered the infantry forward. The next clash was close enough to see faces. An enemy officer broke through our first rank and came straight for the crown aura. He saw a glowing claimant in royal armor and expected a commander who had never fought. Reasonable guess. He shoved one sick soldier aside and swung high for my neck. I read the shoulder first, stepped inside the blade, and cut beneath his guard. He staggered, then kicked dirt toward my eyes and reversed the sword. The move would have worked on the man I had been before the bridge fell. The temporary boost made me faster than the trick. I turned past the blade, struck his elbow, and forced him to expose the neck he had been protecting. The officer tried to recover with a second strike. I knocked his sword wide and took his head cleanly. It hit the ground before his body followed. The enemy soldiers nearest us stopped advancing. My line roared. Pax updated the number. Temporary combat value, 95. Simulation only. Naturally, I told the bracelet. The warranty expires after the murder. Then I pointed my sword at Merrick. Your army is losing to men you called half-dead. Keep talking. It helps them. Merrick's face hardened. He raised one hand toward the reserve. The reserve signal rose over Merrick's banner. He had sent the first charge without moving those troops. The spear wall held. My sick cavalry had survived the retreat. His front line had just watched one officer lose his head beneath the crown aura. Now Merrick needed everything. He committed the reserve. The black banner moved forward. Fresh troops left the rear and rushed toward our line. I turned to the sick cavalry still trapped on our side of the river. The riders had spent the retreat coughing on their saddles. Now they mounted without waiting for permission. Their officer saluted. "Commander, one ride remains," I told him. "Make it rude." The cavalry swept around the front and struck the enemy's side. The riders were still sick. Several tied themselves to their saddles because fever had weakened their legs. They hit anyway. Merrick's first line twisted toward them. I led the infantry into the opening. A shield wall closed in front of me. I struck the top edge, stepped on the lowered shield, and went over it before the soldiers behind could raise their spears. My army followed through the gap. The temporary strength carried me deeper into the line. My soldiers followed the crown aura through the smoke. We drove the enemy backward one shield at a time. The sick cavalry hit again from the side. The enemy front bent toward 2 threats and stopped hearing Merrick clearly. Merrick shouted for the reserve to close around us. The order left his rear exposed. Reese saw the black banner move. "Now," she told Maeve. Their hidden force came out of the eastern trees behind Merrick. Only later did Reese tell me how close Maeve had come to charging early. The changed cavalry route had stranded them east of the river fight. When Maeve heard our first roar, she snapped, "They're fighting now, we move!" Reese caught the back of her robe with the good hand. "If we attack before the reserve moves, Merrick crushes us first." "You made me kiss him," Maeve shot back. "You don't get to hold me back now." "I made you save him," Reese answered. "Save the timing too." Maeve waited until the black banner moved, then Reese let go. That delay turned the wrong road into the enemy's exposed rear. Reese led with the lighter sword, using speed instead of her injured shoulder. She cut beneath the first banner guard's weapon, used his body to block the second, and drove straight toward the plague commander. Merrick turned and finally saw the force he thought had missed the battle. He ordered the rear guard to close. Maeve threw one talisman into the ground. Fire split the formation and opened a lane for Reese. Then Maeve slapped 3 talismans onto the command pole. The paper flashed. A guard grabbed for the seals. Maeve kicked his hand away and shouted, "Touch is a weapon! Learned that from the worst teacher alive." The black banner exploded at its base and crashed into the mud. The rear soldiers turned and saw their commander's symbol fall. Reese's fighters shouted before Merrick could raise another one. "Merrick is dead." The lie moved faster than orders. At the front, enemy soldiers looked over their shoulders. They saw the fallen banner, smoke in the rear, and Reese's sword at Merrick's throat. One man dropped his weapon, another stepped away from our line. An enemy captain struck the second man and ordered him back. The soldier caught the captain's wrist, looked toward the fallen banner, and shoved him into the mud. 3 nearby fighters lowered their spears instead of helping the captain. The soldiers around Merrick had stopped accepting his authority. Then an entire unit broke. We pressed from the front while Maeve and Reese tore through the rear. The pincer closed. Merrick twisted beneath Reese's blade and screamed, "I'm alive!" Nobody turned back. He shouted louder, "Your commander lives! Hold the line!" The nearest officer threw down his spear. Merrick stared at the man. "I gave you an order!" The officer looked at the fallen banner, then at the 6 soldiers advancing beneath the crown aura. He walked away. Merrick was alive, but nobody obeyed him. Reese forced him to his knees. Maeve burned the spare signal flags before Merrick's officers could raise another banner. Merrick looked from the ruined signals to the broken bridge. Then he looked at me. Merrick stared at me for one long breath. "You retreated with the infected to preserve your army," Merrick called. "Then the bridge bound their loyalty, forced my reserve forward, and placed your hidden force behind me." Wesley stood beside me, listening like a student receiving sacred law. Merrick laughed once. "A complete masterpiece." I lowered my sword. "I was trying to fail." Wesley's expression became painfully sincere. "Your Majesty, I understand now," I told him. "That sentence has never improved my day." "I will no longer require explanations," Wesley continued. "I will learn to understand your commands without words." That promise sounded more threatening than Merrick's plague. Before I could argue, the last enemy line dropped its weapons. The 6 soldiers dropped their spears. Some fell to their knees and cried. Others grabbed the men beside them and laughed through the fever. Medical carts waited across the river. Enemy soldiers had surrendered. One soldier shouted, "We can go back!" The words spread through the entire field. "We are going home!" The cheer rolled from the broken bridge to the fallen banner. Men who had expected to die lifted one another onto their shoulders. Medics cried beside patients they had kept alive. The feverish cavalry raised bent lances and shouted until their voices failed. I had entered the trial looking for disposable pieces. Those soldiers had earned the victory and the right to go home.